Starting today, I'm moving in with my son, his wife, and their kids. I don't need anyone else. That's what we decided as a family. Ben said in a tone that suggested he wasn't joking. Whoever you are, get out of the house, old lady. We're gonna work together as a family, so please leave soon. There's no room for you. As my son and his wife said this, mocking me, they gestured as if to shoo me away. Even I reached my boiling point in anger. Yet, I managed to calm down and, facing the three of them, I chuckled. It's silly to stand on the same stage as these people, to get provoked and angry. After all, I've been paying $6,000 a month for living expenses, and they've forgotten that and are trying to kick me out. What are they planning to do from now on? Fine. I'll divorce you too. I'll leave as you've said. At my words, the three of them grinned with disgusting smiles. I turned around, left the living room, and secluded myself in my room. Your belongings are trash. Take everything with you. Ben yelled from the living room. Without responding, I silently began packing my things. My name is Sarah. I'm 65 years old. I married Ben and worked part-time, but now I take care of house duties, also work from home. I met Ben through what you might call a pickup. I was a college student at the time. Ben, who was 7 years my senior and a working adult, approached me, having fallen in love at first sight. Having no experience with men, I was wary and kept avoiding Ben. But Ben didn't give up and kept talking to me whenever we met. It was often just a greeting, but we'd chat if there was time. I reluctantly listened, but eventually, he realized I wasn't interested and said, I didn't mean to bother you. I'm sorry for making you feel uncomfortable. With that, I realized Ben's sincerity and decided to face him. Gradually, I began to be drawn to Ben as well. After we graduated from college, we got married and were blessed with a daughter, Natalie, and a son, Mark. Ben, who loved children, was cooperative in raising our 2 kids, and we lived happily as a family. However, that happiness didn't last long. When Mark entered middle school, I heard something unbelievable while I was working part-time. It was Rachel, a senior colleague who was a year older than me, who told me. She was close in age, had kids, and was easygoing and caring, so I felt a sense of closeness and liked her. One day, as we were heading home at the same time, she said, You know, I was once picked up at the station a long time ago. That was the station where I met Ben. It was a coincidence that it was a pickup spot, I thought as I listened. Rachel continued. My friends were also picked up by the same guy. It became a topic among us, and after observing for a while, it turned out he was hitting on various girls. What? There's someone like that? Yeah, it's surprising. And he was only hitting on girls much younger than himself. Rachel laughed, and I laughed along. Rumor has it, he finally caught a young girlfriend and got married. At that moment, I had a bad feeling. And somehow, I felt embarrassed about meeting Ben here. But Ben fell in love with me at first sight and just happened to meet me here. I wanted to believe he was different from those pickup guys. But my hope was shattered. Moreover, he's been telling everyone he fell in love at first sight. Those who were deceived into marriage, poor things. Rachel continued to speak. But nothing reached me after I sensed that the pickup guy was Ben. I was ashamed of being deceived by Ben's words. Of course, I knew Rachel meant no harm. She didn't know my husband was Ben. Sarah? You look pale. Rachel asked me worriedly as I remained silent. Yeah, I'm fine. Just thinking about what to make for dinner tonight. It's tough every day, isn't it? I wonder what I should make too. I managed to change the subject with that. But my mind was full of what I had heard, and I made mistake after mistake at my part-time job in the afternoon. And that day, after dinner was over and the kids had gone to bed, I said to Ben, Today, you know, I heard something interesting from a friend at work. Interesting? What kind of story? Ben listened to my story. Surely, such a kind husband couldn't have been the worst kind of pickup artist. It must be some mistake. It'll probably turn into a funny story. That's what I thought, but wanting to be reassured, I opened my mouth. You know the station where we met, right? Apparently, there was this guy there who fell in love at first sight with younger girls and was hitting on them. Oh. And, apparently, he even married one of the girls he picked up there. I laughed after saying that, but Ben didn't laugh. Just wanting to be reassured, I, feeling increasingly crushed by anxiety, trembled as I said, "It's just a coincidence, right? You fell in love with me at first sight, right?" My voice trembled more than I thought it would. Then, Ben suddenly burst out laughing as if he found it funny. Relieved for a moment, he laughed in front of me, trembling me, "Love at first sight?" As if you were just the one who fell for it. Really, that coworker of yours shouldn't have said unnecessary things. You would have been happier not knowing. That's terrible. So, you're saying you tricked me into marrying you? Was your love for me a lie? I raised my voice, unable to help it, as Ben continued to laugh as if it was funny. But Ben, uncaring of my feelings, added another cutting remark. It's your fault for being deceived. I wanted a young, stupid woman who would fall for a pickup, that's why I chose you. That remark was evidence that Ben was fully aware he had deceived me. Well, someone like you would have ended up with some terrible guy eventually. You should be glad you ended up with me. I've got work tomorrow, so I'm going to bed. And with that, he really laid down in bed. I think I was stupid too, but it was shocking to receive no support whatsoever. I had thought I was loved, but to realize it was all the same to him was unbearably frustrating. When we went to introduce ourselves for marriage, my in-laws said, "We're relieved he's finally marrying. And such a young girl too. We're delighted." I thought I was being praised, but probably Ben had been repeatedly told by his parents to get married. But now, knowing this truth, there's nothing I can do about it. Honestly, I no longer feel love, but it's not like our marriage is bad right now, and with our children at such a sensitive age, even if I wanted to divorce, I couldn't go through with it. The fact that I was mistaken about being loved and got married was sad and difficult, but I told myself I had to endure it. Yet, over time, I was able to come to terms with the past as the past, and even if there's no love for Ben, there's affection for the family life we've lived. After knowing the truth, our marriage couldn't be said to be good, and Ben started avoiding me on his days off, going to play pachinko. Yet, I no longer thought about wanting a divorce, and after quitting my part-time job, I started working from home, busily living each day. The kids grew up in no time, and both found jobs in our hometown after graduating from college. Natalie later married someone from the same company. She had a child and now lives far away, not able to see them often, but they're living happily as a family. The problem was Mark. After graduating from college, he quit his job soon after. That company wasn't for me. The crappy boss kept dumping work on me. The part-timers are useless, just babbling away. He kept complaining, so at first, I simply thought it was a bad fit with the company or the boss. That's tough. Surely, you'll find a company that suits you, Mark. I even supported his job changes. Thanks to that, Mark changed jobs, but quit again soon after. It was a repeating cycle. I lost track of how many times he changed jobs before turning 30. I wanted to defend my child, but him quitting jobs so quickly, it seemed like Mark was just being selfish. Full-time employment isn't for me. It's too much responsibility, and the pay is low. I'm fine with part-time jobs. If a customer or the head office pisses me off, I can quit right away. Eventually, Mark, having resigned himself to this, is now hopping from one part-time job to another. Of course, that's not enough to cover his living expenses. He lives at home, not contributing to food or utility bills, and seems to use all his earnings as pocket money for himself. Mark, you're over 30. You can't live like this forever. I've tried to reason with him several times. Even if not a full-time job, at least a part-time one. No, even if it's just odd jobs, you won't see a raise if you don't stick with one place. Patience is important. But no matter how much I worry, it's like talking to a brick wall. As for Ben, he'd say, well, don't say that. He's our son. We have no choice but to support him. Maybe that's fine for now. But doesn't he worry about our child's future? Dad really understands, huh? Mark, spoiled by Ben, seems to have no intention of stopping his odd jobs lifestyle. Then, at 34, Mark suddenly announced he was moving out. Apparently planning to get married. And it seems he's found a full-time job. Actually, she's pregnant. So, I've got to do my best. Mark told us this. And I was very happy. Not just for Mark's independence, but also the relief that my worried son was getting married and the joy of having a grandchild. Mark's partner turned out to be Karen, 7 years his junior. Since Ben and I also have a 7-year age gap, Mark laughed, saying it's in the blood. So, Karen came to visit our home. Nice to meet you. She brought a cake from a shop Ben likes, perhaps Mark told her, and her appearance was clean, making a good first impression. Karen, we're looking forward to having you. I greeted her with a smile, and Karen smiled back. But it wasn't a smile. I felt an odd sense of mockery in her smile and tilted my head in confusion. Huh? Oh. Sorry. I just remembered that love at first sight story. Love at first sight? Contrary to my confusion, Ben and Mark started laughing uproariously. Yeah, the story of how Mom got tricked. Really, Mark? You already told her? I was going to. It was about how Ben and I met. I didn't even know Mark knew, let alone that he'd told Karen. I was so embarrassed I could feel my face burning, but at the same time, a sense of loathing for the three of them welled up inside me. Karen laughed again triumphantly, as if she had one, and turned to me. I'm loved by Mark, so no worries there. Is that something you say to someone who is going to be your mother-in-law, even if it's our first meeting? No, maybe she said it to assert dominance because I'm going to be her mother-in-law. Karen, you're funny. And beautiful, too. You must be popular, right? If Dad has a daughter-in-law like Karen, he can rest easy. Then that's great. I'll do my best to be a wonderful wife. The three of them started chatting happily, leaving me out in the cold. But I didn't miss Karen looking down on me with a snicker. With Ben and Mark on her side, she acted as if she was superior to me. Karen was all surface, a collection of the worst traits of women. And so, Mark and Karen got married and started living together in an apartment not too far from our house. Despite her being such a person, if Mark is happy, that's all that matters to me. They eventually had a beautiful baby girl. A healthy girl. I thought, now Mark really has to do his best, when an incident occurred. It happened one day when I returned from shopping for dinner. I heard a baby crying inside the house. Thinking Mark's family had come over, I hurried inside. As expected, Mark, Karen, and my granddaughter were there. Oh, you're here? You should have let me know. Happy, I put down my bags and rushed to my granddaughter. Then Karen said to me in a chilly voice, "Who are you?" What? I was stunned by her words. I couldn't understand what was happening. Mark laughed heartily at her words. Amidst this, Ben said seriously, "Starting today, my son, his wife, and their kids will live with me. We don't need anyone else. That's what we decided in the family." What? From Ben's tone, it didn't seem like a joke. I don't know who you are, but old lady, get out of the house. We're gonna work together as a family from now on, so please leave soon. We don't have room for you. My son and his wife dismissively said this while making gestures as if shooing me away with their hands. It was a misunderstanding to begin with, getting married and all. At Ben's comment, the three of them burst into laughter again, pushing my anger to its boiling point. I should not be ridiculed to this extent, no matter what. However, facing the three of them, I too let out a laugh. Finding it foolish to stand on the same stage, be provoked, and get angry with such people. After all, I'm paying $6,000 in living expenses, and they forget that and decide to kick me out. What are they planning to do going forward? Fine. I'll divorce you too. I'll leave as you've asked. In my words, the three of them smirked with an unpleasant smile. I turned away and left the living room, retreating to my own room. Your personal belongings are trash. Take them all with you. Ben yelled from the living room. Without responding, I silently started packing my belongings. The next day, I called the moving company. Given it was a weekday during the off-peak season, they said they could move my stuff that evening. Please, as soon as possible. I quickly responded, and it was decided that I would move out that day. I couldn't wait to leave this house. That was my sole focus. Watching me busily prepare to leave, Ben said with a laugh, "A jobless old lady, where exactly do you plan on going? I might have forgiven you if you had apologized." I completely ignored his words. I didn't understand why I should apologize when there was no reason for me to. "I'll be in the way of the move, so I might as well go to the casino," said Ben, having been continuously ignored by me, and left the house in the afternoon. Though I thought it would have been nice to hear even a single word of thanks, expecting anything from him was foolish. "Well, goodbye then," I said, watching Ben's back as he left the house. A few hours later. Thanks to the moving company, all my belongings were transported. I contacted the real estate agent to bring the keys immediately, moved everything in, and the move was complete. There's still a bit of unpacking to do, but I was relieved to have successfully moved. Now, all that's left is to proceed with the divorce, and I will be officially free. Lying on the sofa in a liberated mood, my phone rang. It was Ben. "Hello?" As I answered the phone, Ben yelled furiously from the other end. "What do you mean by this? What are you thinking?" His sudden loud voice made me instinctively pull the phone away from my ear. After a pause, I said, "What? Why are you so angry? Don't play dumb. What kind of spite is this? You took all the furniture and appliances. The house is empty." I was puzzled by his words and slowly looked around the room. The furniture and appliances I brought from the house were all here. But there was nothing strange about that. "What's wrong with that? You said not to leave my belongings behind." "What?" "In other words, personal belongings. You thought they were yours? I chose and bought them with my money." I laughed heartily. Ben on the other end of the phone couldn't say anything and let out a choked sound. "Mark and Karen were there, so you got carried away and said such things about kicking me out, but you weren't seeing the reality." "Well, I'll give you the appliances then," Ben said desperately, but I didn't miss his words. "Give me? They were mine to begin with. Don't get ahead of yourself." Ben fell silent again at my scolding. I could almost see his demeanor and nearly burst into laughter. "Shut up. Anyway, this cuts all ties between us. Don't ever contact me again." And with that, he hung up the phone. It was funny that Ben, who had called me, forgot that he was the one who initiated the call after being outwitted by me. I couldn't stop laughing alone in my new house. Though I didn't take his "don't contact me again" seriously, I still needed to get him to fill out the divorce papers, so I planned to contact him again. Annoying as it was, I intended to go back to the house the next day. As I left the office with a heavy heart, someone called out to me, stopping me in my tracks. "Sarah! I knew it was you, wasn't it? Rachel?" It was Rachel, with whom I had gotten along well when I was working part-time. Though I knew her contact information, we had only met a few times since I quit, and I hadn't seen her at all in recent years. But a reunion after so many years was a happy occasion. We decided to have coffee and went into a nearby cafe. After catching up on old times, Rachel said, "Did you have some business there?" I told her everything in response to her question. I shared that I was the one who had married the pickup artist Rachel had told me about, and how my husband, son, and his wife had kicked me out of the house. While I laughed as I told the story, Rachel felt down on my behalf. "That's how it was. I'm sorry for saying too much." Rachel looked apologetic, but I was actually grateful. Indeed, it was a shock when I found out, and I was too embarrassed and ashamed to talk about it back then. But now, I think it was good that I knew. I could have ended my life being ridiculed. My feelings about this are genuine. There were times I thought I would have been happier not knowing, but that's only if Ben had been capable of reflecting on his past. Given Ben's character, if I had remained ignorant, I would have been ridiculed even more. I'm able to take action now, while I still have the energy, thanks to discovering Ben's true nature back then. By the way, Rachel, did you have some business here too? At my question, Rachel started speaking after a moment's thought. Actually, it's about my son. Your son? I thought you had a daughter. After I quit my job, I had another child. I came here for a legal consultation about him. It turned out she was having trouble with her son's partner. Thinking that every family has its issues, we talked about various topics and then parted ways. When I returned home, my son's family was there. Apparently moving in their stuff. Hey, you crazy old lady. Taking all the furniture and appliances, what's wrong with you? They really seemed intent on living together. The two glared at me as they came in. Where the large fridge used to be, there was now a small fridge that they must have used in their apartment. Its diminutive size made me burst into laughter inadvertently. What's so funny? Nothing. Karen seemed to understand why I laughed and snapped at me angrily. I elegantly dodged her attack and turned to Mark. Where's Dad? In the bedroom. The baby's sleeping, so don't make any noise. According to Mark, Ben seemed to be babysitting the granddaughter. He did take good care of the kids when they were young. Back when I still felt happy. With that memory in mind, I headed to the bedroom. I brought the divorce papers. Just fill them out and leave them. As soon as I entered the bedroom, I said that. Ben glanced at me and clicked his tongue, standing up quietly. He was in the middle of cutting the baby's nails, having laid her down on the bed. My relaxing time ruined by this old hag. He muttered, complaining as he snatched the divorce papers from me. Ignoring Ben, I peered at my granddaughter's sleeping face. Though a child of my disappointing son, she was my blood-related granddaughter. There's no lie in saying she's adorable. But looking at her face with a smile, I felt a chill run down my spine. Her cute little face looked exactly like Rachel, whom I had just met. And then I remembered the story Rachel had shared earlier about her son's girlfriend getting pregnant, lying to scam money, and then disappearing. Just a few hours ago, I thought every family has its challenges upon hearing Rachel's confession. But could it be that Karen was the one who scammed money from Rachel's son? That's what crossed my mind. If my suspicion was correct, then this child might not even be Mark's. With a pale face contemplating this, Ben spoke to me. Here, I filled it out. Now get out. Okay. And throw this away too. Well, you won't be seeing this kid again anyway, but you can keep it if you want. Ben handed me a tissue wrapped around the baby's nail clippings along with the divorce papers. I took them without a word and left the house immediately. Then, I hurriedly contacted Rachel again. A month later, my phone rang once more. With Ben on the other end. Hey, I got a notice that the electricity and gas bills are unpaid. What's going on? Again, he raged one-sidedly, taking his anger out on me. I don't know. Pay it yourself. Where's the money? How are these bills paid before? Where's the bank card? I could hear him rummaging around. Probably turning the house upside down looking for the bank book. Seeing Ben in a frenzy, I couldn't help but laugh. What are you laughing at? Get over here. You've made a mess, so I can't find anything in the house. After saying that, Ben hung up the phone. Though I wasn't keen on it, there was something I needed to do. Reluctantly, I got ready and called someone. That night, I rang the house's doorbell. You're late. What have you been doing, you freeloader? Seeing my face on the monitor, Ben rushed out of the entrance and froze upon seeing the person next to me. Who might this be? She's a friend of mine. It's been a long time. Rachel greeted him deliberately. However, Ben tilted his head in confusion. You don't remember the face of every girl you've picked up, do you? Rachel laughed. I couldn't help but laugh along. Ben, feeling embarrassed, glared at me. What kind of harassment is this? Bringing a woman I hit on here, thinking I'd be upset? I wouldn't do something so childish. I'm here to see Karen, I replied. Together with Rachel, I entered the house. As expected, the living room was occupied by my son and his wife. They seemed quite relaxed in a home without me. Seeing my face, they made it clear with their expressions that they thought I was a nuisance, but frankly, I didn't want to come either. So, you must be Karen. Rachel began upon seeing Karen's face. Huh? Who are you? A friend of the old lady? Why are you bringing her here? She's a stranger. Karen retorted with disdain towards Rachel. Rachel looked incredulous but quickly responded. I've been looking for you. It was hard to find you since your last name changed. Hey, lady. What do you want with Karen? Mark stood up. Then Rachel handed Mark an envelope. Mark, puzzled, pulled out a document from inside. Tim Brown? Who's that? What's this? Genetic research? Mark read the name on the document within. Tim Brown. Rachel's son's name. Hearing that name, Karen's face turned pale, and she snatched the documents and envelope from Mark. What's this, Karen? You shouldn't look at someone else's mail. It's wrong. Her voice was clearly trembling. Karen likely knew who Rachel was and the content of that letter. We did a DNA test for my son and Karen's daughter. Huh? Your child is my son's child. Unfortunately, there's no blood relation with Mark. With Rachel's words, Mark turned pale and froze. Karen remained motionless, equally shocked. What do you mean? Ben, who had been silent, joined our conversation. I smiled broadly and said, I made good use of the granddaughter's nails you gave me. Yes, I had passed the granddaughter's nails Rachel gave me before to her. And I told her the granddaughter looked just like Rachel. It wasn't improbable for Karen, rude and deceitful, to scam someone for money. Rachel discreetly sent the nails I provided and her son's toothbrush to a laboratory for testing, which confirmed a parental relationship. However, Rachel hadn't yet informed her son, knowing he would be extremely worried about the baby supposedly born. She wanted to assess the situation herself first to prevent her son from being shocked. That's not my child? It must be some mistake. Mark was devastated. Pitiful, thinking you were loved and being tricked into marriage. Rachel said to Mark. The same words Karen had used on me. Being deceived into marriage by Ben and now hearing those words directed at Mark made me involuntarily smile. It wasn't my grandchild after all. Ben collapsed, shocked. The child will be taken care of by us. There will likely be a lawsuit, but... Wait! Not that, please! How will you raise her? You're getting divorced, right? And you don't work. Right. You also have to return the money. Karen clung to Rachel's arm, crying. I'm sorry. Please forgive me. Rachel spoke to Karen gently, trying to console her. You drove Sarah out and sneaked into this family with lies. Do you think you'll be forgiven? Though Rachel's tone was gentle, the coldness in her words left Karen unable to retort, only to wail in response. And what about the bank? Yeah. I turned back to Ben, who was in a daze, his eyes vacant. Before the granddaughter was born, Ben was overjoyed, calling her his inner grandchild, his hope for living. Now, that is gone. I can understand the shock. But I had to confront him with an even harsher reality. The bank is only with you. There are no others. What? How did we manage the living expenses until now? The utility bills? There must be an account for living expenses. I was the one providing for the living expenses. Every month, $6,000. Of course, I have no intention of doing that anymore. At my words, Mark also looked up. Ben's eyes darted around, unsettled. $6,000? Every month? Ben sounded surprised, as if he didn't know until now. Yes. Didn't you know? Well, you just spent it however you liked. Ben looked up at the sky, perhaps reflecting on his actions. Thinking he hadn't been caught. He had poured all the money he could freely use into gambling, and when that ran out, he secretly took from the food money. It wasn't once or twice that the money I set aside for payments disappeared. Thought you weren't caught? Your wasteful spending inflated our living expenses. In my words, Ben defiantly raised his voice. But there must have been a bank book with savings, like for bonuses, right? You took that years ago, all of it blown on gambling. Don't you remember? Confronted with the truth, Ben looked startled. Likely having forgotten. And he must have misunderstood that it still existed. I sighed in disbelief. I've been compensating for that with my own money without saying anything. Do you realize now how despicable you were to drive me out without knowing how much you depended on me? You better live with that regret. Liar! Where did a poor person like you get that kind of money? Ben yelled, refusing to accept the truth. It was pointless to argue. If you can't believe it, then fine. I then turned my gaze to Mark. And you, Mark. What? Mark, who had been disheartened by the situation with Karen and his daughter, looked at me with empty eyes. Hopping from job to job, never contributing to the household expenses. Living off my money and then driving me out. Have you ever thought about what happens next? Silence. You know Dad's savings are zero. He might be reemployed now, but considering his age, how long can he work? Mark seemed to grasp the gravity of the situation, trembling as if he had seen something terrifying. You might have thought returning home would save you living expenses like when you were single, but driving me out, you've made a huge mistake thinking life can go on as before. No one responded after that. Only Rachel patted my shoulder, satisfied. I felt fulfilled having said what I wanted and addressed her. Let's go home. Right. Karen, I'll be in touch. As Rachel and I were about to leave, Mark called out. Mom, where are you living now? Living alone must be tough, right? You can come back. His smile was forced. Calling me Mom for the first time in decades. Clearly trying to appease me. His ulterior motive was transparent, and I responded with a slight smirk. Not at all. I'm living in a high-rise condo now. It's more comfortable than here. A high-rise condo? Yes. Bought it for $2 million. Don't worry. If anything happens to me, I've arranged for everything to go to my daughter, so Mark won't be burdened. Hearing the amount, Mark and Ben exchanged looks. Then Ben stared at me, blinking and forgetting. A $2 million condo? Where did you get that kind of money? Are you really wealthy? Rachel tilted her head, puzzled. Didn't your family know you're a best-selling author? No. I never said that because they would just ridicule me. Turns out you got away the biggest one. We laughed together, and Ben and Mark suddenly changed their attitude, trying to stop me from leaving. Sarah, I was wrong. You've been doing such incredible work, and I never understood. I'm truly sorry. Please, come back. Their sudden change of heart was nauseating. Both began to plead in soft voices, clinging to me. To think you can live in such a house, Mom, you're amazing. Come back home. If that's impossible, could you at least help with the living expenses? Please. I was just deceived by that woman. It's sad, isn't it? Mark said, pointing to a disheartened Karen. Karen flinched, but it seems like she no longer had the energy to fight. Sitting next to her sleeping child without moving, I felt a bit sorry for her, but after all, it was her own doing, and I had no intention of helping. Yes, being deceived into marriage is pitiful. I returned my gaze to Mark and said that. Well then. That's why you have to figure it out yourself, right? It's your fault for being deceived. With those words, I pushed Ben and Mark away. They must have realized they were abandoned by me. Stunned, they slumped onto the sofa. See you then. I cheerfully bid goodbye and left the house. A family that had no interest in me. Even when I said I was paying, they wouldn't believe me and treated me as poor. Even when I said I was working from home, they ridiculed me, saying, "Working from home, really?" They probably didn't know I was a novelist, nor did they know about the royalties and real estate investments I made with that money. I couldn't care less about being praised for my work by such people now, nor did I want anything to do with them. Karen, who tricked me and got into the family with lies, and Ben and Mark, who kept belittling people, ended up losing their family, money, and hope. Maybe we were a family of similar kinds, I thought, laughing inwardly. Afterward, Karen and Mark divorced. Karen was kicked out but had nowhere to go, so she's apparently still living in the house temporarily. Ben and Mark, despite everything, couldn't bring themselves to throw out the small baby. Karen must be living there miserably. Mark eventually quit his job again. He thought he no longer had the duty to support a wife and child, but seems to have forgotten that he now has to support his father. In that moneyless house, I wonder how the two will survive. I hope they reflect on their actions and live their lives accordingly. Later, Rachel and her son Tim sued Karen. Rachel is gearing up for parenting from scratch. It's enviable to have something to strive for at this age, but it reminds me that I too must keep working. I open my laptop. Maybe for my next book, I'll write about a woman who was deceived into marriage but turns her life around and finds happiness. Watching the night view from my beautiful condo, that's what I thought. I had returned to my parents' home in Alaska the day before and was at the airport. Since my brother couldn't pick me up due to a prior engagement, his wife, Mary, was supposed to come get me instead. It was just past 1:30 p.m. The agreed time was supposed to be 1 p.m. It was already over 30 minutes past. As I was wondering what to do, I heard a car horn honking. Turning around, there was Mary. I pulled my suitcase and hurried over to her. "Mary, thanks so much for coming all this way. Was traffic bad? Are you okay?" I assumed she was late because she got caught in traffic and told her so. However, Mary didn't reply. As I was about to give up on the conversation and get into the car, the door wouldn't open. Huh? Is it locked? It's on purpose. What do you mean? If you weren't planning to let me in the car, why come here? Was that some kind of hallucination? I doubted my ears. But if that was the case, if you weren't planning to let me in the car, why come here? Just for kicks. Mary laughed with a creepy smile on her face. Then she said, "Why don't you hitchhike home?" You're kidding, right? Well, I'm off. Take care. With that, she left. Realizing she was quite pleased with herself for merely teasing me, I understood that it was all just a jest. Anger bubbled up within me, and I felt an irritation I had never known before. Well, I might as well hitchhike home, just like Mary said. My name is Hannah. I'm currently 30 years old and work in a home cleaning service. The story of how my husband, John, and I met goes back 10 years, to our college days when we worked at the same part-time job. I was born in Alaska and moved to Chicago for college. To earn money for living on my own, I didn't join any clubs and spent my days going straight from class to work. Back then, I worked at a bar, and many of the staff were around my age, and we really got along well. That's why I was able to enjoy my college life. Among them, I got along particularly well with John. Though we went to different colleges, we were the same age and he was easy to talk to. We often had shifts together, so I spent more time with him than with other members of the staff. Hey, Hannah. The boss is off today. Lucky, huh? No way. That's awesome. Let's secretly eat the leftover desserts. Sounds good. It's a deal. We would sneak off like this, just the two of us, or chat about love interests, who liked whom at work, and other lighthearted topics. Back then, I thought of him as just a good guy friend, and I didn't have any romantic feelings for him, but it seems John felt differently. As we were both about to graduate and had secured full-time jobs starting in the spring, we decided to quit our part-time jobs at the same time. After a farewell party thrown by our close friends, and everyone else had left, about 10 minutes later, John asked me to meet him alone at a nearby park. There was no reason to refuse, so I headed to the park right away. "Hey, over here," John called out, waving his hand. "What's up? Are you drunk?" I laughed, seeing John's flushed face looking serious. Usually, John would just say shut up and laugh it off, but not that day. He looked seriously unsettled and didn't change his expression. Feeling the unusual atmosphere, I couldn't help but ask, "What? What is it?" "Well, it's just that." "Come on, spit it out." "I don't want to be apart." "Huh? From who?" "From you. We won't see each other after we quit the job, right?" "I hate that idea." I was momentarily at a loss for words, not fully grasping the meaning behind John's words. "What? Really?" "Stop with that unbelievable reaction. It hurts, you know." No. Sorry. It's just too unexpected, and my brain hasn't caught up yet." "I don't see you just as a friend. I've always liked you romantically. So, if it's okay with you, would you want to go out with me?" Seeing John speaking with a seriousness I had never seen before, I realized his feelings for me were genuine. Since I had always seen him as a friend, I told him I needed some time to think, and we parted ways that day. 2 weeks passed with John's confession hanging in the balance, and the time came for the welcome party for new employees. My mind wasn't there, I kept thinking about John. When we were working part-time, we used to see each other 2 or 3 times a week. But since quitting the job, it had been 2 weeks without seeing him. I felt strangely lonely. I couldn't help but think, am I that simple, as I realized I missed John and liked him not just as a friend. And so, our relationship progressed, and after dating for 7 years, we decided to get married when we were 27. It was time to meet each other's parents. As for meeting my parents, I decided against formally announcing it. My parents had divorced when I was young, because of my father's affair. So, it was just my mom and me, as I had no siblings. I had always been the only family for my mom. The reason I chose my current job was because I thought it suited me. My mom was always busy with work, coming home late every day. So, I naturally took on cooking, laundry, and cleaning by myself. But I never found it burdensome. In fact, I enjoyed those moments so much that I decided to pursue this career. I called my mom to tell her about the wedding. "Hello, Mom? There's something I want to talk about." "Oh, Hannah. How have you been?" "What is it?" "Yes, I'm fine. Actually, I want to marry John. So, we're planning to come over and formally greet you." "Oh, congratulations. You're finally getting married. I'm really happy for you. If it's with John, I can rest assured you should marry him." "Mom. But, I know what John looks like, and there's no need for you all to come formally. It's a long way here, and it's just me, so I'll visit you guys at your place instead. My family home is in Alaska. Traveling from where we live in Chicago to Alaska takes about 6 hours by plane alone. My mom knew about my long-term relationship with John and had met him a few times, so she said it wasn't necessary for us to come for a greeting. However, when I mentioned this to John, he said, "No, it doesn't matter what your mom says, we should go and properly meet her," and so we ended up going to my rural family home to greet my mom together. "I told you it was too far for you to bother coming. Distance doesn't matter. I wanted to see your mom in person and talk to her. I promise I'll always make Hannah happy." Hearing this, my mom, with tears in her eyes, happily said, "Please take good care of my precious daughter." With my family's greeting done, the next week we headed to John's home. Having been in a long relationship, We had many chances to visit John's family home before we decided to get married, and I had met his parents several times. John's dad is the president of a major company, and they have a pretty big house. His mom is the wife of a president, a very classy lady. What you'd call wealthy. I remember being shocked by the size of their house the first time I visited. At first, I was scared they might be like the strict and frightening parents you see in dramas. Would they disapprove of me being from a single-parent household or my job? But surprisingly, both of them were really down-to-earth and easy to talk to. They didn't care at all that my mom was a single mother and really took a liking to me. So, I wasn't too nervous about this marriage greeting. Long time no see. Sorry for intruding. Oh, Hannah. It's been a while. You look well. Hannah. Welcome. We've been waiting for this day. Old man here was getting impatient. John's parents were as kind as ever, and I felt relieved. They were genuinely happy about our marriage, and we had a great time that day. We thought our families had accepted us, and we were free from any family troubles, or so I thought, but there was one person I found a bit difficult to deal with, almost like a nemesis. That person was John's brother's wife. She named Mary. Nathan's wife, Mary, and he had gotten married 2 years before us, triggered by the news that they were expecting a child. When they got married, I was still single and just dating John, but we had been together for a long time. When I heard Natalie was going to have a baby, we decided to visit John's family to celebrate. Congrats, Nathan. Nathan. Congratulations. Hannah. Brother. Thanks to both of you. Nathan responded with a smile, and sitting next to him was a woman holding a cute baby. Immediately identifiable as Nathan's wife. I hurriedly introduced myself. Nice to meet you, I'm Hannah. Nice to meet you too. I'm Mary. Nathan has told me a lot about you. We're close in age, so let's get along. Mary smiled warmly, giving off a very calm and kind vibe, which was my first impression of her. The conversation turned to ordering pizza, and we chatted and ate together. Talking with Mary, I found out she was a year younger than me. She worked as a nurse and was currently on maternity leave. As we continued to chat, our husbands said they were going to step out for a smoke, leaving us to continue our girl talk. What was Nathan's proposal like? We got married because I was pregnant, so there was no romantic proposal. It happened casually in the car. Like, we're having a baby, so should we get married? I'm still holding a grudge about it. What? But marriage proposals are every girl's dream. We'll have to lecture Nathan later. Our girl talk naturally transitioned to discussions about careers. Why did you decide to become a nurse, Mary? My mom was a nurse, and ever since I was a child, I wanted to be like her. So, I studied really hard. Wow, that's amazing. And cool. But night shifts must be hard, right? Not at all, it's challenging but fulfilling. By the way, what do you do, Hannah? Me? I work in a home cleaning service. Huh? What's that? I felt Mary's brows furrow for a moment. It's indeed a job not everyone is familiar with. So, maybe she didn't get it? I explained again. I go to clients' houses to do things like cleaning, laundry, and sometimes even cooking meals, taking care of children, or keeping dogs company. It really varies depending on the client. What kind of job is that? Just sounds like being a helper. Mary muttered under her breath. Huh? What did she just say? Did I hear that wrong? What? Oh, nothing. I could never do a job that seems so uninteresting to me. I actually enjoy housework, so it's not a chore for me at all, and it's surprisingly fun. Housework is something anyone can do. I personally would hate being bossed around by strangers. It sounded a bit sarcastic, but oh well. Everyone's entitled to their own opinion, after all. I tried not to take Mary's comments too personally. But after that, every time I met Mary, she would criticize my job. Are you still sticking with that pointless job? Pointless? I actually find it quite fulfilling. Oh, sorry. Just slipped out, she would say, in a tone that seemed to belittle my work. This didn't change even after John and I got married. Hannah, I heard you got married to John? Congratulations! It's amazing how John's parents approved of someone in such a low-end job as yours. Low-end job. I couldn't believe my ears at her harsh words. Well, isn't it? Just odd jobs? A helper? Something like that? Did you sweet-talk your father-in-law or something? That's a terrible thing to say. I didn't sweet-talk anyone. They accepted me willingly. Wow, the eldest son's wife of such a wealthy and prestigious family working as just a helper? That's quite the embarrassment. Mary's insults about my job became more intense, taking advantage of my silence. What made it worse was that she would never say such things in front of Natalie or John. She only said them when it was just the two of us. And then she would always add, "Please don't mention any of this to John or Nathan, okay?" If she didn't want them to hear, she shouldn't bother me in the first place. It seemed like Mary enjoyed insulting me and watching my reaction. As per her request, I didn't tell Natalie or John about the insults. So neither of them knew her true nature, with my husband saying, "Mary is really ladylike, isn't she?" I could have told John about her, but nobody likes to hear negative things about their sibling's spouse. It felt wrong to stir things up, so I never brought it up. And since I wasn't being openly harassed at the moment, I thought, oh well. I initially thought we could get along well since we were close in age, but it was clear that wasn't going to happen. But then, one day, something happened that made oh well not an option anymore. That day, I was at the airport. I had gone back to my family home the day before and stayed overnight. Usually, John would pick me up from the airport, but today he was out with his brother Natalie, so he couldn't come to get me. Even though I won't be there, it looks like Nathan's wife is going to pick you up. Mary? She's not resenting it, is she? What? Why would you think that? She doesn't seem to mind at all. You always seem to get along. Nathan said he'd asked her to do it. Just take it easy for today. I was astounded by my husband's obliviousness, but what could I do? Okay, thank you. Then I'll be waiting. I was sure Mary disliked me. So, I never imagined she'd actually come to pick me up. I was skeptical but decided to wait and see. Maybe Mary had changed her feelings? Hoping for that, I waited for the agreed time. However, even after the appointed time, there was no sign of Mary. It was already past 1:30 p.m. More than 30 minutes had gone by since our agreed time. Maybe it was foolish of me to think Mary would come for me after all. Feeling down about it, I was about to leave the meeting spot when I heard a car horn honking. Huh? Turning around, there was Mary. I pulled my suitcase and ran towards her with a smile. Mary, thank you so much for coming all this way. Was the traffic bad? Are you okay? I tried to be friendly, but Mary looked displeased. Sorry, was it too far for you? No matter what I said, Mary kept her silence. Rather, it seemed like she was ignoring me. As I got no response to anything I said, I reluctantly gave up on trying to make conversation and tried to get into the car, but the door wouldn't open. Huh? Is it locked? I looked at Mary remaining silent. Then she finally turned to me and spoke for the first time. It's on purpose, she said. What do you mean? Did you really think I came to pick you up? As if I'd let someone with such a low-end job in this car? What? What does that mean? Exactly as I said. People like you are not welcome in my car. Mary said with a chuckle, which only made me more irritated. Why come here if you had no intention of letting me in the car? Huh? Isn't it obvious? Just for a laugh. I wanted to see that angry face of yours. Mary started laughing with a creepy expression. While I stood there dumbfounded, she spat out, "Why don't you just hitchhike back?" "Hitchhike? Are you serious?" "Yep, I'm off then," she said and walked away. To come all this way just to mock me. My anger towards Mary's actions began to boil over. But I couldn't dwell on it. John was waiting for me at home, after all. Hitchhiking didn't seem realistic. So I decided to take a bus or train home. I had just texted John, saying, "I'm still at the airport waiting for Mary, so I'll be home in about an hour," right before this happened. To avoid worrying him, I called, "Sorry, I'll take the train and bus back, so my return will be delayed by about an hour." "What? Why are you taking the bus and train? Mary was supposed to head there, right?" "Well, she did come to the airport, but then she left me behind." "What? Why? What happened? How are you getting back?" "I don't know. She told me to hitchhike back." "What the hell? I'll tell Nathan to ask her to come back immediately." You could tell from the phone call that John was confused and agitated. That makes sense. He had complete trust in Mary, after all. It was when I was contemplating whether to take John's advice and have Mary come back. I spotted someone familiar. "Ah, I just saw someone I know, I'll ask if they can give me a ride. I'll figure something out, so wait for me." "A friend? Are you sure you'll be okay? Be careful. We'll be home soon too, so don't push yourself, okay?" "I'm sure it'll be okay. Thank you." With that, John and I ended the call. I decided to chase after the person I spotted to talk to them. Then, I noticed my phone ringing. Is it John? Thinking that, I checked the screen only to see Mary's name displayed. After leaving me stranded at the airport, what could she possibly want now? I was so upset with Mary that I decided to ignore the call. However, she kept calling back relentlessly. Something felt off. Could she have gotten into an accident? If something happened to Mary because I kept ignoring her. Worried by my negative thoughts, I finally decided to answer the call. "Hello? Hey. What did you say to Nathan?" Mary's voice was so loud that it hurt my ears, forcing me to pull the phone away. It seemed Mary hadn't been in an accident after all. "Huh? What are you talking about?" After calling me repeatedly, Mary suddenly started yelling, making me even angrier. This time, I couldn't help but respond more forcefully than usual. "Nathan scolded me, asking what I did to you. Why do I have to be yelled at?" "Oh, that's what this is about." I didn't talk to Nathan directly. I just told John I'd be late, and when he asked why, I mentioned you left me behind. "We had a deal not to tell John or Nathan, right? It was supposed to be just your problem, but now it's the worst." Mary started screaming again, blaming me. "It's your fault. What are you going to do about this? How dare you, with your low-end job?" Wait a minute. I never made such a promise, and what's wrong with telling the truth? Her outrage was unjustified. "What? If you just wanted to complain, I'm hanging up." "Wait. If I don't pick you up, Nathan will scold me. Just wait there." Mary, still furious, said she would come back and then hung up abruptly. Well. There was something important I wanted to say. But, it's okay. Thinking this could actually be a chance to turn the tables on Mary, I decided not to call her back and instead waited with the acquaintance I had just met for Mary to arrive. 20 minutes after ending the call with Mary, she showed up at the previously agreed meeting spot. "Get in," she said in a brusque manner, gesturing to the car with her chin, urging me to get inside. No thanks. I'll pass." "What? What are you talking about? I came all the way here to pick you up. But you were the one who said you wouldn't give me a ride in the first place, right? Why are you being so spiteful? Just get in already. Nathan is going to scold me." "No, I've managed to hitchhike. So, I don't need a ride." "Hitchhike? Look, these two have offered to take me home, I said, and the people I had spoken to earlier stepped out from behind the car. Mary was shocked when she saw them. Oh, mother-in-law? Father-in-law? Yes. Those people were none other than John's parents. In other words, they were Mary's in-laws. 20 minutes earlier. While I was on the phone with John, I noticed two familiar figures. They were holding hands, carrying lots of souvenirs, and looked very happy together. It turned out they were John's parents. Mother-in-law. Father-in-law. Oh, Hannah. What a surprise. What a coincidence. Why are you at the airport? I was visiting my family home in Alaska. Are you two traveling? Yes. My wife wanted to go on a hot spring trip, so we took a little vacation together, they said, smiling at each other and sharing their travel stories. It was clear they had a wonderful trip. Seeing their cheerful faces made me forget all about my irritation with Mary, and I felt warmed by their happiness. Was John supposed to pick you up at the airport? No, John is out with Nathan. Those two are really close, aren't they? Oh? So how are you planning to get back home? I was actually supposed to be picked up by Mary, but, well. As I hesitated, my mother-in-law expressed concern. What happened? Did something happen? Can you tell me? So, I decided to share what Mary had done to me. How Mary had left me stranded. How she had been insulting me all this time. My in-laws listened intently, nodding seriously. Where is Mary now? She said she was coming back here over the phone. Is that so? Well, this might be a good chance to give her a little surprise, my father-in-law said with a mischievous grin like a boy planning a prank. This was 20 minutes ago. At my father-in-law's suggestion, we decided to wait together for Mary's arrival. Mary was stunned to find my in-laws there, not expecting them to be present. Oh Mary, what a coincidence. Why are you here? Hannah was about to hitchhike because you told her to. We decided to give her a ride. You did tell her to hitchhike back, right? My mother-in-law said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Ah, it was. Mary was at a loss for words, mumbling incoherently. Then, she glaring at me. She was caught off guard by my father-in-law's next words. Mary, do you have something to say to Hannah? Please, say it in front of us. Bracing herself, Mary sighed heavily and began. This woman is a low-end worker, you know? How can I say that the eldest son's wife of Nathan's wealthy and dignified family is just a helper? So, I thought I'd say it for you, kind mother and father-in-law. She's a disgrace to this family. Mary spat out her words venomously. A stark contrast to the usually demure and gentle Mary. My in-laws seemed a bit shocked. If you call Hannah's job low-end, what does that make me, a homemaker? That's different. Mother-in-law has class, and being a homemaker doesn't matter. It's absurd to think it's okay for me, but not for Hannah. Hannah has her own dignity too. But, regardless, Hannah doesn't fit in this family. She shouldn't be accepted. It's not for you to decide. It's wrong to judge someone solely by their occupation. From my perspective, both Mary and Hannah are suitable for this family, my father-in-law said, placing a reassuring hand on Mary's shoulder. That's right. We love both of you. So, Mary, please be nice to Hannah. For Nathan and John's sake, and for ours, okay? Tears started to stream down Mary's face. I'm so sorry. I truly am. She apologized through sobs. It's okay. I'm sorry too, I responded, and somehow we managed to reconcile. Both Mary and I felt anew the warmth of my in-laws. Afterward, Mary decided to drive back in her car, and I went with my in-laws. Though I could have gone with Mary. Let's have a long chat today. Can you tell me about your trip to Alaska? Thank you so much. Because of you, Mother and Father, it seems I can now talk normally with Mary. What are you talking about? We're a family, aren't we? With that, we all went back to the family home where Nathan and John were waiting. Upon arrival, Nathan immediately approached Mary, who was being lectured in a rather upset mood, but it was clear she was quietly accepting the scolding. After seeing Mary's demeanor, Nathan seemed convinced she was genuinely remorseful but warned, "You know what will happen if you do something like this again, right?" Everyone probably thought of divorce at that moment. "Hannah, were you okay?" "I'm sorry. I had no idea about what was happening between you and Mary." John expressed his regret and concern. "It's fine. Besides, I'm okay." "Really? You're not just saying that?" "Yes. Thanks to your parents, I'm safe, and it looks like Mary and I have made up." "What? Dad and Mom did? What happened exactly?" John looked utterly confused. It made me laugh. "Why are you laughing?" "I was just thinking how happy I am. Thank you for marrying me." "What, suddenly, thanks, I guess." John scratched his head in embarrassment. 3 years later. We were both 33. As I was cooking, my husband rushed over to me. "Hannah, please, just sit down. Don't move around too much. Your belly is getting big, you know." "Oh, you're being overprotective." "I'm fine doing this much." "No way. If something happened to you or the baby." "I'm just worried, so please sit down." "Come on, to the sofa." Guided by my husband, I sat down on the sofa. Yes. Actually, John and I are expecting a baby. I'm in my final month and the baby is due soon. The doctor told us it's a girl. "Hannah, if anything comes up, make sure to ask me, okay? I'm somewhat of a parenting veteran." Mary said confidently, hands on her hips. "Mary. Thank you. I'll definitely ask for advice. Once the baby is born and grows a bit, let's go on a trip together with Nathan, John, you, me, and the kids." "Maybe we should invite mother and father-in-law too?" "That sounds great. I'm looking forward to it." We smiled at each other as we talked about the future. Mary no longer ridiculed my profession. It seems the words of my in-laws resonated with her in her own way. Once like cats and dogs, thanks to my in-laws, we've truly become good friends, now able to discuss anything. Surrounded by kind in-laws, a loving husband, and a caring brother-in-law and his wife, I am truly happy now. I ended up getting pregnant with Henry's child. I'll be taking the house and the car, just so you know. Out of the blue, Molly announced she was pregnant. And the father is Henry, of all people. I kind of saw it coming. I had thought that something like this might happen someday, but still, when faced with it, I find myself at a loss for words. What used to be a joyful dinner table has now turned into this. When did it all go wrong? Before me, Henry and Molly were laughing with their mouths wide open. Both of them seemed desperate to kick me out of the house. Well, I have plans of my own. Fine, here's the divorce papers. I laid the filled-out divorce papers in front of Henry. Henry and Molly looked surprised for a moment but quickly understood the situation and started to celebrate. "This means we can." "Yeah, exactly." They think they can enjoy this moment. I'll make sure they regret taking me for granted. With determination, I continued with what would be my last meal in this house. My name is Kelly. I'm a 27-year-old working part-time at a bookstore. I've been living a happy life with my husband, Henry. I met Henry when I was working at an IT company before. He joined the company as my subordinate. My first impression of Henry was that of a very polite and nice young man. At the same time, it made me want to work harder. Let's start with this task today. All right. Henry quickly learned anything I taught him, making him a rewarding person to teach. He not only managed tasks I initially struggled with without any problems, but also acted with consideration towards others. I was a little jealous of him, as he was so different from how I used to be. But, seeing Henry's sincerity up close, any feelings of jealousy gradually faded away. "Henry, I really appreciate how hard you work all the time. I'm relying on you moving forward as well." "Yes. But all of this is thanks to you, Kelly. I'm really grateful for everything." It's true that I rely on Henry. I never hid this fact and made sure to express my gratitude actively. However, Henry never boasted about it, always thanking me and acknowledging my help with his work. Watching him, I couldn't help but think what a good person he is. Whenever I praised him, Henry always responded with a pleased smile. A year after we started working together, Henry suddenly asked me out. "Hey, Kelly, would you like to go out for dinner with me sometime?" "Dinner? Are you sure it's not just to discuss work?" "No, it's not about work. I just genuinely want to have dinner with you." "Really?" I never imagined Henry would ask me out for a meal. I was a bit surprised but delighted at the prospect of dining with him. "Thank you. I'm so happy. When do you want to go?" "Thank you. Let's see." A few days later, after work, we went to a pub near our office. We took our seats and relaxed for a moment. Henry seemed a bit more nervous than usual. "Are you okay?" "Yes, I'm just a bit nervous, sorry. It was me who asked you out, after all." Saying this, Henry gave a troubled smile. Seeing his smile, I couldn't help but find it adorable. An hour later, after having a few drinks, the tension had eased. We talked about work and our personal lives, having conversations we normally couldn't. 2 hours after we sat down, we left the pub. The outdoor air seemed to sober Henry up, returning him to his usual self. "Sorry, I got a bit drunk. Did I say anything weird?" "No, everything was fine." Hearing my words, Henry visibly relaxed. Watching him, it seems he might be a bit of a lightweight when it comes to alcohol. It's quite charming, really. As I was mulling over this, Henry looked straight at me and asked, "Hey, would you like to go out for dinner with me again?" There was no way I could refuse an invitation from Henry. Of course. And so, we started to have dinner together regularly. Eventually, our relationship evolved from being just colleagues to becoming lovers. Even after we started dating, Henry remained earnest and kind. He continued to excel at his job and became someone whom other employees relied upon. I can't count how many times I've been grateful that Henry was my subordinate. Then, after 2 years, Henry and I decided to get married. "Kelly, would you marry me?" Henry asked, his voice shaking with emotion. There was no reason for me to say no. "Yes. To think I'd get to marry such a wonderful man. How lucky am I? Just imagining our future life together makes me smile." However, this euphoria was short-lived. Soon after, I found myself caught up in an unexpected and troublesome situation. Following our marriage, I quit my job to become a full-time homemaker. We lived in a beautiful apartment, sharing meals together. On Henry's days off, we'd go shopping at the nearby mall or take short trips for sightseeing. This life was exactly what I had envisioned. I never thought it would become reality. "Hey, I'm off tomorrow. Is there anywhere you'd like to go? Could you take me to the supermarket nearby?" "Sure." Despite being tired from work, Henry would help out with household chores on his days off and after coming home. It would be a different story if we were both working, but since I've become a full-time homemaker, it felt wrong to have him help. "You must be tired from work, let me take care of the chores. You rest." "No, I want to help." I've told him several times that I wanted him to rest, but Henry insists on helping around the house. Eventually, I accepted it and we began doing chores together. As we got used to married life, I started working part-time at a nearby bookstore. I've always loved books, and customer service wasn't a burden for me. The staff was all very kind, making it the perfect workplace for me. Now that I had started working, I thought it'd be great if we could save up for a trip with Henry. Just as I was daydreaming about this while working one day, an event occurred that would drastically change our lives. After finishing my shift and doing some grocery shopping, I headed home. It was past 6 p.m. Henry probably hadn't returned home yet. With that thought, I leisurely made my way back. I'm exhausted. As soon as I entered the house in my usual manner, I felt something was off. But I quickly discovered what it was. I heard some unfamiliar voices. Who could be? I picked up the bag filled with groceries and cautiously proceeded to the living room. Gently opening the door, I saw Henry and an unknown woman sitting cozily on the sofa. What? I couldn't help but let out a loud exclamation. Who was this woman? Could Henry be cheating? My mind raced with various thoughts, and I began to panic. However, Henry quickly came over to me and introduced the woman. Sorry. Didn't mean to startle you. Well, this is Molly, my childhood friend. Sorry for the surprise. Childhood friend. Yeah. We've known each other since before kindergarten. The reason Molly had come to our house. She came over for dinner, it turns out. Apparently, Molly recently moved to this area. When she told Henry, he invited her over for a meal at our place. Initially, Molly declined, but after catching up and wanting to see Henry, she eventually accepted his invitation. Oh, I see. So, could you make dinner for 3? I don't mind, but I didn't buy enough groceries. I wonder if it'll be enough. I'm sorry. It's because I came over unexpectedly, isn't it? Oh, don't worry about it. It's fine. Hearing why Molly was here, I honestly thought Henry was being rather selfish. A heads up would have prevented all this frustration. Yet, it didn't feel right to send Molly away now. But the thought of going shopping again was bothersome. I rummaged through the kitchen drawers and fridge, trying to scrape together enough for 3. Fortunately, we had some leftover ingredients, so I managed to prepare a meal for 3. While I was cooking, Henry and Molly seemed lost in their own world on the sofa. I could hear them catching up and talking about why Molly moved. Though I was initially annoyed with Henry's actions, those feelings faded over time. If they're happy, that's all that matters, I guess. Dinner's ready, I announced after setting the table. But they were so engrossed in their conversation, they didn't notice. Hey, guys! Oh, sorry. Henry finally noticed after I called out a few times. He took Molly by the hand and led her to the dining table. Molly didn't seem to mind being led by the hand. Watching them, I felt a bit annoyed again. Was that really necessary? But I chose not to say anything. Wow, this looks delicious. Right? Molly complimented the meal, and Henry looked proud. Molly quickly finished her meal. A few minutes later, as Henry and I were about to clean up, Molly came over. Can I help with anything? Oh, no need. Don't worry about it. But I insisted on coming over unexpectedly. Well, if you insist, could you help with the dishes? I thought I'd get other chores done while she helped. Glancing at Molly's hands, I noticed her uncertain grasp on the task. She seemed inexperienced, making me instinctively offer help. Are you okay? Yes. I'm fine, she said with a smile and went back to washing. Well, stopping her now seemed wrong. So I let her continue and went back to my chores. Molly started coming over more frequently after that. Initially, I wasn't thrilled about my husband bringing a female childhood friend home, but as we shared meals, I began to understand more about her, and my displeasure faded. Molly started helping out with meals and chores almost every time she visited. Her skills in housework noticeably improved, which was pleasing to see, considering we're not much different in age. We had become good friends. Maybe this kind of life isn't so bad. One day, I noticed something odd about Molly. Molly, could you help me clear these dishes? I tried to engage her in cleanup, but her usual smile was absent. I'm a bit tired today. Could you please do it? Oh, you're tired? All right. I responded as she turned back to the TV. Are you okay? Yeah, I'm fine, she assured, with Henry still by her side. Since Molly started visiting, the two of them enjoyed daily, friendly conversations and meals. Seeing them get along so well, given their childhood friendship, I never felt the need to intervene. Molly must be busy with work, I thought, as I began cleaning up by myself. But then, the next time and the time after that, Molly didn't offer to help at all. In fact, it seemed like her attitude had gotten worse. Lately, Kelly's cooking's been kind of meh, hasn't it? Yeah, it's not really that good. It used to be better. They said this right in front of me without any remorse. What? Shoot. Did Kelly take that harder than we thought? But, I mean, it's true though. They said, and then started laughing loudly. This was the first time someone had directly criticized my cooking, and I felt more sad than angry. From that day on, Molly and Henry started making derogatory remarks about me. Molly kept coming over for meals, but, of course, stopped helping with any preparation or cleanup. It was as if Molly's true colors were starting to show. Kelly kind of has a bland vibe, doesn't she? Why'd you marry her? Indeed. I've forgotten. Well, I don't have a shred of affection for her now anyway. That's terrible. Whenever I stepped away for a bit, they'd inevitably start bad-mouthing me. At first, it hurt, but then I got used to it. Is there anything sadder than getting used to being bad-mouthed? But, of course, I wasn't going to stay silent forever. If you dislike me that much, then maybe you shouldn't come over anymore, I told Molly clearly. They were surprised since I usually just went along with whatever they said. They froze for a moment at my words, but it was only for a moment. What, all of a sudden? It's all just jokes, obviously. Yeah. Just joking. Really, thank you for everything, Kelly. They said, their words dripping with sarcasm. I find that hard to believe. No, really, it's true. Right, Molly? Yeah. After all, we're always imposing on you. They continued, their insincerity evident. No matter how many times I addressed it, their attitudes never changed. I even considered divorce. But then there was Henry's persuasion, the preparations for divorce, and whether the divorce talks would progress at all. When it came down to it, various obstacles made it difficult to take that first step. To Henry and Molly, I must have seemed like a very convenient woman. As I stopped admonishing them, they only became more brazen. Hey, I'm going out with Molly today. Just the two of you? Yeah. So? I mean, even if you're childhood friends, you're married. I'm not really comfortable with that. It's fine because we're just friends. Nothing weird about it. Oh, I'll bring you back a souvenir. What do you want? No matter how much I asked them not to go out alone together, Henry wouldn't listen, dismissing my concerns with promises of souvenirs and assurances that nothing inappropriate would happen because they were just friends. I don't care about souvenirs. I want you to stop going out alone together. When I got angry, Henry's demeanor suddenly changed. I told you, we're not doing anything wrong. What's your problem? This is unbelievable. Fine, I won't come home tonight. What? Wait a minute. Henry stormed out and didn't come home that day. He probably stayed at Molly's. Seeing Henry prioritize Molly over me made my feelings for him grow colder. When did Henry change so much? Or perhaps he was just showing his true self. The more I thought about it, the more I felt deceived and utterly miserable. Then one day, out of the blue, Henry said something unexpected. Hey, how about we start thinking about having kids? Kids? Yeah. Life's been settling down, after all. But I couldn't agree. I don't think it's possible anymore. Why? We're still young enough, and we have the money. It's a matter of the heart. I can't see it working out when you always prioritize Molly over everything else. Wanting kids is one thing, but raising them is another. I couldn't imagine having and raising children with someone who would always put Molly first, no matter what. But my resistance seemed to annoy him. What? You think you have the right to refuse? I'm saying I want a child with you. That's exactly the problem. Would you do the same to our child? Leave all the childcare to me while you go off to Molly? Henry raised his voice even more, hitting the nail on the head. Shut up. Whatever I do, it's none of your business. If we take his words at face value, it means he intended to leave all the childcare responsibilities to me even if we had a child. That just reinforced my decision not to have children with him. Eventually, my continuous refusal seemed to make Henry give up on the idea of having kids. I thought he finally understood. But my assumption was about to be proven drastically wrong. A few months later, as usual, Molly came over for dinner. I was reluctant, but not serving dinner would only lead to more trouble. They kept criticizing my cooking as always. I thought if they didn't like it, they shouldn't come over. But I guessed they would finish everything despite their complaints. That thought was interrupted when Molly suddenly put down her chopsticks with a smile. Hey, can I say it? Yeah, go ahead. Say what? I was tense, wondering what she was about to say. Then, Molly dropped a bombshell. I'm pregnant with Henry's child. The infertile one should get a divorce and leave. I'll take the house and the car. I couldn't believe my ears. But at the same time, a feeling of I knew it emerged. Seeing them together daily, I could somehow accept it. I had thought something like this might happen someday, but still, being faced with it, I was at a loss for words. And to be called infertile. Henry must have told Molly something to that effect since I refused to have children with him. After that, Henry and Molly only had unbelievable things to say to me. Now that they were having a child, I had become an inconvenience. Well, I had my own plans. Fine, here's the divorce papers. I pulled out the pre-filled divorce papers I had stored in a drawer. I had prepared them when divorce had crossed my mind. Never thought I'd actually use them. But this seemed like a good opportunity. Feeling no need to hold Henry back, I told them to sign the papers. Initially, they were confused, but gradually smiles spread across their faces. This means we can. Yeah, exactly. Henry casually grabbed a pen nearby and signed his part. Here you go. This means we're divorced. Good luck to you both. They must be imagining their future life together. But such thoughts could only occupy my mind for so long. I began preparing to leave the house, thinking about what I needed to do next. I definitely need to take this with me. I pulled out a notebook hidden at the back of my desk. It was a diary where I had written about my daily life, work, and the things Henry and Molly did. It was just a hobby, but who knew it might come in handy. I flipped through it to make sure it was all there. Then tucked it into my bag. Luckily, I found a weekly apartment I could move into right away, so I left the day after Molly told me about her pregnancy. Finally leaving, huh? Hurry up and leave. Molly had stayed over after dinner. Probably planning to live in this house from now on. I wondered what would happen to her previous residence, but realized it was a pointless thought. All right, you two be happy together. With that, I left the house. I immediately started looking for a new place to live. I found a new apartment quickly and started preparing to move in. But finding a lawyer wasn't so easy. I feared Henry and Molly might get away with everything. Letting them get away without doing anything would be too regrettable. But if something can't be found, there's nothing that can be done about it. It was devastating to think about it. But then, I came across a lawyer named Carlos. Something about him made me think he might be able to help. I dialed his number and was greeted by a friendly male voice. Then, I was immediately greeted by a friendly male voice. We arranged a meeting and ended the call. Somehow, I felt he could make a difference. This intuition would soon prove to be correct. Carlos listened to my story with great empathy. Having not confided in anyone until now, the kindness felt deeply moving. Clearly, Carlos was the only choice. I decided to rely on Carlos Brown. Afterward, to arrange a discussion about compensation, I asked him to prepare a formal notice for Henry and Molly, addressed to Henry West and Molly Brown. Carlos seemed to somehow know the two. Do you know them? Well, Molly is actually my sister. Sister! I had noticed they shared the same last name, but never imagined they were siblings. That meant it made sense that he knew Henry, who was a childhood friend. Is it okay to take action against your sister? Yes, of course. She's the one who did wrong, so she needs to properly reflect on her actions, Carlos said with a troubled smile. 2 weeks after receiving Molly's pregnancy news, I had moved into my new place and was taking a moment to breathe when my phone rang. It was from Henry. Probably about the formal notice arriving. I figured he would say something like, "What's this about?" or "We're already divorced, so don't bother me." Feeling it was a hassle, I didn't answer. A few seconds later, the call ended. But then it rang again immediately. Ignoring it only led to more calls, so I decided to pick up. Hello? Hey! What's this about a formal notice? Are you kidding me? Why are you calling repeatedly? It's annoying. What? Annoying? You started this with your weird actions. Send me this notice after we're divorced, telling me not to get involved. I couldn't help but laugh at the predictability of his response. What are you laughing at? I just find it amusing. Make sure you read what's in the notice carefully. Why? You can run, but I'll find you no matter what. You two need to seriously reflect on your actions. Reflect? Weren't you okay with it? You even congratulated us when Molly said she was pregnant. What? Did you not understand that it was just politeness? If I made a fuss, it would just cause trouble. You two get angry too quickly to have a rational conversation. What did you say? Henry was furious on the other end of the line, but I wasn't scared since it was just a phone call. Well, that's it. Make sure you don't ignore the notice. I emphasized this point and then hung up. The calls stopped after a few more attempts. 2 weeks later, the day to resolve everything arrived. I had warned them not to ignore the notice, but would they really come? I felt slightly anxious, but just over 5 minutes past the appointed time. The door opened. Henry and Molly entered the room with tense expressions. Carlos, sitting next to me, glared at them. Glad you two could make it. Why is my brother here? Kelly, did you do this on purpose? Finding my brother to represent you is just in bad taste. It was purely coincidental that I asked Carlos for help. And I didn't even know he was your brother. Molly fell silent at my rebuttal. So, what's this about? Sending weird documents. Kelly and I are divorced. We're strangers now. Indeed, strangers. But Kelly has been treated terribly by you two. For what? Whether they genuinely didn't understand or were playing dumb. Their arrogance was too much considering their position. For the damages. What are you talking about? Are you saying it didn't happen? Then why is Molly pregnant? Carlos interjected as Henry tried to obscure the issue. That happened after we divorced. And how do you even know about that? I heard it from Kelly. Why do you keep lying? Initially, the divorce happened because Molly got pregnant, right? And since the pregnancy was discovered before the divorce, it's clear you two were involved while still married to Kelly. If you continue to lie, we can always contact the hospital. Carlos's words carried a slight threat. But without going that far, the two would surely continue to lie. Those words likely came from knowing Henry and Molly for so long. But you know all this? Thanks to Kelly's diary, we know exactly what you two have been up to. A diary? Yes. Since you married Henry and Molly started coming over, all the things they did that bothered you. You wrote it all down. Hearing Carlos's words, Henry and Molly glared at me. But if they hadn't done what they did, none of this would have happened. I'm not troubled by their glare.
What, am I the bad one here?
Yes, you are. If you were more capable in cooking and cleaning, and more attractive, I wouldn't have had to turn to Molly. It's all your fault for being inadequate. Kelly lost to me. Despite the presence of a lawyer, Henry and Molly continued with their nonsensical talk. The pregnancy was the tipping point, but I realized it was good that I divorced Henry. Still, my mind couldn't fully grasp the situation. What are these two even saying? Do they truly believe they've done nothing wrong? The more I listened, the more confused I became. Then Carlos spoke up again.
Hey! Enough already! What's with all this nonsense you've been saying?
But.
It's not about but. What do you mean she's not good at cleaning, not attractive? Saying Kelly lost to you, what kind of attitude is that? Truly disrespectful.
It's the truth. What's wrong with saying that?
The truth? Could you say that in front of Kelly's parents? In front of a judge? A judge? Why would a judge come into this?
If you keep up this nonsense and don't pay the compensation, we'll end up in court. It's fine by me and Kelly, but you two will be at a disadvantage. The compensation could end up being much more than what's being asked now, plus you'll have court fees. If you think you have a chance of winning, I get why you'd resist, but continuing this way is frankly idiotic. Carlos, while angry, made sure to speak calmly to them. Plus, if it goes to court, it'll get out. You might have to leave your jobs. Is that what you want? Hearing the word court seemed to scare Henry and Molly. Their bravado vanished.
Court? It'll get out at work?
Yes.
Even at my workplace?
Of course. Realizing they had no way out, they both slumped, defeated. Then, after a pause, Henry spoke.
Sorry, Kelly. We were wrong.
Molly followed with her apology. Truly sorry. Are you reflecting?
Yes, we are. Truly sorry.
They both apologized again, slightly bowing their heads. Their words of apology were good to hear, but were they truly reflecting on what they did wrong? Do you really mean that?
Yes, we do.
Then let's conclude this with a compensation agreement. Right. Please read this document. Knowing they hadn't really reflected, I accepted their apology to end the conversation. I hadn't acted thoughtlessly.
What? Compensation? Why? Why do we have to pay?
Exactly what I wanted to see. They probably thought their apology would make everything okay. Thinking an apology was enough to end all this was naive.
Why?
What do you mean?
We apologized. Why do we still have to? That's right. We're not paying any compensation.
Their previously meek attitude disappeared, and their arrogance returned. Clearly, they hadn't reflected at all. Have you never heard that if apologies were enough, we wouldn't need police? Even if you apologize, some things can't be forgiven. What the victim, me, wants isn't an apology but compensation. Understand? Henry's expression changed suddenly. He realized I was serious about the compensation.
But you know we don't have that kind of money. There's rent, car loans, and now a child on the way. We'll need even more money.
That's not my problem. We're strangers now. Why should I, a stranger, worry about you? You need money because you're having a child? It's absurd to come to me with that after everything you've done.
No way.
Seeing I wouldn't budge, Henry's face turned pale.
Really the worst. Why do you want to take our money so badly? I don't get it.
Who's the worst here? Kelly hasn't done anything wrong. You harassed her, decided you wanted a child, and made one. And now you're saying this is Kelly's fault? Please, enough with the jokes.
But,
as I said before, continuing to throw tantrums will only lead you to court. If it goes to trial, you'll end up needing a significantly larger amount of money. Excuses won't work then. Carlos said, taking a moment before continuing. Moreover, continuing this way might lead to you losing social credibility. It could become neighborhood gossip or even reach your parents' ears. Are you okay with everyone knowing you were sued for an affair? I'd be mortified. Hearing Carlos's speech, Henry and Molly seemed to finally understand their situation. Did they want to maintain a good image? Perhaps they didn't want their misdeeds to be known by others. If you still want to argue after hearing all this, sorry. Really sorry. We'll pay the demanded compensation. Just please, no court. We don't want to upset our parents. They were already causing enough distress. So, you'll pay quietly? Yes. We'll pay. So please, don't raise the amount. And what about you, Molly? I'll pay too. Properly. I'm sorry, I was out of line. Their apologies seemed hollow, but it was better they realized their actions sooner. They looked defeated on the couch. Agreeing to pay the compensation amount suggested, I also want to apologize. I'm really sorry for everything. No need. I quickly reassured him, grateful for his help. If there's anything else, don't hesitate to reach out. Thank you so much. After a brief chat with Carlos, I headed home, feeling reassured by his reliable presence. Half a year after the divorce, I'm living comfortably alone in my new home, continuing my part-time job at the bookstore, surrounded daily by things I love. After the confrontation with Henry and Molly, I don't know what became of them. Whether they stayed in that house, got married, or how they're managing with a child, I'm not sure. But honestly, their fate doesn't concern me. They must be managing somehow. I hope they're reflecting on how terrible their actions were, but since we'll never interact again, it doesn't really matter. From now on, I want to live for myself, doing what I want and living life my way. I'm looking forward to what the future holds. Checking my schedule for tomorrow, I sip my favorite tea. I'm not cold, leave me alone. I won't hand this child over to someone bad like you. On the evening when a major cold wave was reported on the news, I was hurrying home. That's when I happened to spot my niece, but something about her seemed off. For some reason, she wasn't wearing her coat, just carrying it in her arms. Looking closer at what she was holding, I was shocked to see it was a baby. Moreover, both my niece and the baby looked unusually thin and their clothes were dirty. In this cold, where are you going with a baby? Unable to ignore my shivering niece, I offered to let her rest at my house for a bit. As soon as she saw me, she snapped at me angrily. Shut up! Who says I'm going to your house? I have a bad relationship with my sister, and her daughter, my niece, dislikes me as well. Still, her rejection was stronger than I expected, which took me aback. But under the cold sky, I felt it was dangerous to leave my niece and the baby alone. Trying to sound as gentle as possible and smiling, I invited my niece to my house, but she firmly refused. Mom said to never trust you. You're a good-for-nothing. My niece wouldn't take my hand, ignoring everything I said, and kept resisting with her faltering body. What should I do? How can I help them? While I was internally panicking but still trying to persuade my niece, a car unexpectedly pulled up right beside us. Shocked at what might be happening next, I was astonished to see my husband stepping out of the car. Well, no choice then, I'll have to take her by force. He simply said, and before we knew it, he swiftly picked up my niece, baby and all, and quickly placed them inside the car. Hurry up and get in, he urged me, and as I scrambled into the passenger seat, he started the car somewhat roughly. I protested his forceful action, akin to a kidnapping, but he drove on without a word. The place we eventually arrived at left me breathless. My name is Maple. I'm a typical 29-year-old housewife, born and raised in an ordinary family and married to an ordinary man. I have an older sister by 2 years. I don't recall our relationship being particularly bad during our childhood. Though we had our fights occasionally, we also played together, just an average pair of siblings. However, after becoming adults and getting married, my sister changed. The man she married was what you would call wealthy. He drove a luxury car, wore high-end watches, and was always dressed in stylish suits. Influenced by her husband's values, my sister's spending became extravagant after getting married. She started buying high-end clothes and accessories one after another, and even for daily groceries, she would only shop at upscale supermarkets. Not only that, but she began to look down on me and our parents, calling us poverty-stricken. Moreover, my sister and her husband lived in the town next to ours, and she would boast about her house at every opportunity, which honestly got annoying. Ah, living in an apartment is something only poor people do, how pitiful. If you had married a rich man like I did, you could have lived in a spacious and beautiful house like mine. This house is super comfortable, well worth the $1 million we spent on it. Every time we met, my sister would flaunt her wealth, and my irritation grew until one day I finally snapped.
Enough! Always talking about money, it's so annoying. I'm happy with my house and my life. Stop interfering!
As I screamed at her, red-faced and nearly lunging forward, she snorted and laughed.
Oh, you must be jealous, aren't you? Oh no, the jealousy of the poor is so unseemly.
Seeing my sister looking down and mocking me, I came to despise her deeply in my heart. Following that incident, my sister's snide remarks escalated. Even at family gatherings at our parents' house, she would deliberately mock me and my husband.
Is that all your husband makes? So little, he must be an incompetent regular employee.
Oh, is that why you have to work part-time? Wow, that's sad.
Your wedding was really cheap, wasn't it? It was almost all family there. In contrast, look at ours. Our ceremony was lavish. We had 100 guests, and the dress, venue, and food were all top-notch. If only you could have married up like I did.
My greedy sister even tried to take my necklace once. It was the only branded item I owned, a treasure gifted by my husband for my birthday. But it seemed my sister couldn't stand me owning a brand item.
How dare a poor person like you wear branded goods? Actually, it doesn't suit you at all, it's a pity for the necklace. It would look much better on me, so hand it over.
In the end, she didn't manage to take the necklace, but she tore the chain, and I quietly cried, feeling as though she had destroyed a memory shared with my husband. After that incident, I started to ignore my sister completely, feeling nothing but discomfort whenever we met. In avoiding her, I also decided to distance myself from her family. However, my brother-in-law was always busy with work and frequently on business trips, so we seldom saw each other anyway. Even when we did meet, in stark contrast to my chatty sister, my brother-in-law was a man of few words, and we hardly ever spoke. Nevertheless, being influenced by my sister who flaunted her wealth, I came to view my brother-in-law as someone who was also likely to boast about being wealthy. My sister and her husband have a 9-year-old daughter named Susan, who also seems to dislike me and my husband. I don't think we've done anything to warrant such disdain from her, but every time we meet, she glares at us, and even when spoken to, she hardly responds. While I've grown distant from my sister's family, and it's not particularly an issue, being treated coldly even by my niece does make me feel a bit sad. So, while I have managed to cut ties with my sister and her family, I often hear about my sister's activities through a neighbor who works part-time at the same place as me. According to them, my sister recently gave birth to her second child. In between being busy with childcare, she seems to be living happily, indulging in her favorite brands. On one peaceful day, having no interactions with my sister, leading a calm life, I encountered an unexpected incident. It was in the dead of winter when the news was all about an incoming severe cold wave. With snow expected to start falling, I headed to the local supermarket to finish up some shopping. It was incredibly cold, as the news had warned, and I was walking briskly with my scarf pulled up to my nose. Then, on my way, I happened to spot my niece, Susan. Before Susan noticed me, I thought about quickly leaving. However, something about her seemed off, catching my attention. Strangely, she wasn't wearing her coat, just holding it in her arms. Looking closer at what she was carrying, I realized it was a baby, to my surprise. Moreover, both Susan and the baby looked unnaturally thin and their clothes were dirty. She was walking with her nose bright red, clutching the coat tightly around the baby as if to protect it from the cold. Clearly struggling and shivering from the cold herself. "Susan, where are you going in this cold with a baby? Come on, at least come to my place to warm up for a bit." I couldn't just ignore her and called out to my niece. Startled by my voice, she jumped and then, upon seeing me, started yelling at me aggressively.
"Shut up! Who says I'm going to your house?"
Though I knew she disliked me, her vehement rejection took me aback. But under such cold conditions, I felt it was dangerous to leave her and the baby alone.
"But you must be cold without your coat on, right? Let's warm up at my place for a bit. Then, I can take you home, okay?"
I tried to speak to my niece with the gentlest tone and a smile, but she was adamant in her refusal.
"It's not cold, just leave me alone. I have to protect this baby. I won't hand them over to someone bad like you."
"I wouldn't hurt you or the baby, I promise."
"Lies. Mom said to never trust you."
Despite my attempts to reach out, my niece wouldn't grab my hand and refused to listen to anything I said, continuing to resist with her unsteady body. I was internally panicking, wondering how I could possibly help them when suddenly a car pulled up right beside us. To my surprise, it was my husband who got out of the car. "Well, no choice then, I guess I'll have to take you by force." Saying just that, he quickly picked up my niece, baby and all, and placed them in the car. "Maple, hurry up and get in," he urged, and as I rushed into the passenger seat, he started the car with a bit of roughness. "Just stay calm, and I won't harm you. Please, don't make a fuss," he said nonchalantly, not even looking at my niece. As for my niece, perhaps intimidated by my husband's firmness or the suddenness of being brought into the car, she became quiet, a stark contrast to her previous behavior. However, she looked so pale and weak that she seemed like she might collapse at any moment. My husband took us, including my niece and the baby, straight to the hospital. Lost in confusion, my niece and the baby were taken away by a nurse. While waiting for their examination to finish, I asked my husband, "Hey, what's all this about? Why were you there just now? And why rush to the hospital of all places?" His forceful action, almost akin to kidnapping, made me slightly confrontational, but he responded with a wry smile. "It was pure coincidence that I was there, just happened to pass by on my way home from work. I was curious about what you were arguing about, but more than that, Susan and the baby looked terribly pale. I just thought we needed to get them to a warm place right away." He initially thought our home would suffice for warmth, but was alarmed by their unnaturally light weight when he picked them up. Fearing that their poor complexion wasn't just due to the cold but possibly due to illness, he instinctively decided to head not home but to a hospital that could provide appropriate care. Although being suddenly put in the car was a shock, if my husband hadn't shown up and it was just me, I wouldn't have been able to do anything. Reflecting on it, his actions, while abrupt, were immensely appreciated. Eventually, it seemed the examination for my niece and the baby was complete, and my husband and I were informed about their condition by the doctor. Apparently, both were suffering from malnutrition and were now receiving 4 drips while resting in warm beds. Aside from malnutrition, there appeared to be no other abnormalities, providing us some initial relief. However, the situation of a 9-year-old wandering outside without any adult supervision, carrying a malnourished infant, raised suspicions of neglect. When we informed the doctor that we were not fully aware of the circumstances, he immediately reported the situation to the police. About 30 minutes later, after the 4 had finished and my niece woke up, we had a chance to talk to her. Whether it was the hospital environment or the warmth of the place that calmed her down, my niece was no longer in her previous state of total refusal and was willing to engage in a normal conversation. According to her, my sister, her mother, was currently away on a trip with friends and not at home. Likewise, my brother-in-law was absent due to his usual business trips. During my sister's absence, she had left the entire care of the baby to my niece with the instruction, "You take care of it." However, without any specific guidance, my niece had been trying to care for the baby by imitating what she had seen her mother do. Amidst this, the baby's complexion turned pale, and it started crying inconsolably. Unable to calm the baby down, my niece decided to take the baby to the hospital. She used her only coat to wrap the baby for warmth and set out for the hospital despite the cold. I stumbled upon my niece during that journey. Had we not found them, my niece and her siblings might have frozen to death by now. Realizing this possibility made me shiver.
That must have been tough. By the way, why did you have such an aversive attitude towards my wife?
My husband casually inquired, and my niece awkwardly averted her gaze as she responded. Apparently, from a young age, my sister had instilled in her the lie that I was a bad person. She told my niece, "I was bullied by my sister since we were kids. She's a bad person, so you must never get close to her." Of course, that was a lie from my sister, but to a child, a mother's words are everything. Without verifying the truth, my niece grew up believing I was the enemy who bullied her mother. However, witnessing how my husband and I earnestly tried to help them this time made her question what she had been told by her mother. "Is what Mom said true? Were you bullying her?" My niece asked with sincere eyes, and I shook my head in response.
"Your mom and I got along when we were kids."
"If you don't believe me, you should ask Grandma and Grandpa." Moved by my answer, my niece tearfully bowed deeply.
"I'm sorry for being so defiant when you were just trying to help. I'm sorry for hating you all this time because I believed what Mom said."
Understanding the reason my niece had always disliked us brought me relief, but also a strong anger towards my sister. According to my niece, my sister wouldn't be back until tomorrow, so we decided to take care of my niece and her siblings for the night. After apologizing, my niece seemed to feel lighter and started to engage in normal conversations with us, albeit still a bit awkwardly. Feeling her becoming more comfortable, I asked her about her daily life while we were eating dinner at our house. It turned out that even before the baby was born, my niece often had to stay home alone. During those times, my sister neither prepared meals in advance nor gave her money for food, leaving my niece to go hungry. I felt a simmering anger towards my sister's selfish actions. After ensuring my niece and the baby were fed and had fallen asleep, I called my parents to plan revenge on my sister. The next day, my husband and I took my niece and her siblings to my sister's house. My parents were already waiting there, and my mother rushed to embrace my niece and her siblings the moment she saw them.
"You've had a tough time, haven't you? You did well."
Held by my mother, my niece quietly shed tears. Then, we decided to wait for my sister's return. While leaving my niece with my mother, I went around the neighborhood to inquire about my sister's behavior. When I shared that she had been neglecting my niece and the baby to go out, most of the neighbors were outraged and shared their observations of my sister's usual cold treatment towards my niece, including frequently yelling at her. Also, having learned that my sister was expected to return home sometime after noon today, I waited for her with my parents. I tried calling my sister's cell to inform her that we had taken care of my niece overnight and that we were waiting for her return at her house, but as expected, she did not answer. So, ignoring my sister's lack of response, I continued to wait for her return at the entrance of her house, together with my parents. After a while, my sister arrived back home with a few friends.
"What? Why are you here? And Mom and Dad too? What do you want?"
Upon seeing me, my sister immediately showed her displeasure without trying to hide it. I stared back at her without backing down and said, "Last night, we found Susan walking with the baby and took care of them. I tried contacting you many times, but you never noticed, did you? There should have been numerous missed calls from not only me but also the police and our parents regarding this matter." Pointing this out to my sister, who seemed unaware, prompted her to hurriedly check her phone. Seeing the call log, the color drained from her face. realizing the situation was serious after seeing missed calls from the police as well, she said. "Oh. I just remembered I have something else to do. So, I'll be going." "Wait. Where do you think you're going?" As she tried to flee, our father grabbed her by the scruff of the neck to stop her. Caught by our father, my sister momentarily tried to struggle and resist but soon gave up and hung her head in resignation. Our parents have always been strict about manners and etiquette, and from a young age, my sister and I were brought up to be well disciplined. I am grateful to my parents for instilling in us the proper attitude and manners one should have as a person, but my sister seemed to struggle with such formalities and often disliked our parents for it, frequently escaping from their discipline. My parents, particularly my father, never overlooked such behavior from my sister, and I believe his attitude towards her was quite strict. Perhaps because of this, even as an adult, my sister still feels intimidated by our father. The sight of our family arguing as soon as my sister returned home, especially with my father catching her trying to flee, caused her friends to become uneasy. In front of them, our parents loudly scolded her for her mistreatment of her grandchildren, including this incident.
How could you go on a trip leaving a 9-year-old and an infant behind? What were you thinking? You say Susan is responsible, but she's still a child. To dump the care of a baby on such a child. Are you even a mother? And it's not just this time, it seems you've left Susan alone to fend for herself many times before, without even preparing meals. Do you even realize you're a mother? If your husband is often away on business trips, it's all the more your responsibility to look after the home and children, isn't it? As my parents revealed more about my sister's behavior, her friends were puzzled, asking, "What do you mean, and didn't you say you were leaving the kids with your parents?" However, witnessing the anger of our parents, the sheepishness of my sister, and the frightened look of my niece peeking out from behind us, they seemed to realize the truth in my parents' words. Now, everyone present was glaring at my sister. As if she couldn't stand the atmosphere, my sister continued to make excuses while trembling and turning pale. It's not like that. I was told my husband was at home yesterday. Lies. Then how do you explain everything up to now?
That's. While this exchange was ongoing, the police arrived. "Excuse us, we are from Central Police Station. We received a report last night suggesting your daughters might be subjected to abuse. Could we discuss this matter in more detail?" Oh, wait. Eventually, without much resistance, my sister was taken to the police station. After being taken in, my sister underwent questioning and, being her first offense, was released with just a stern warning. The person who appeared as my sister's guarantor was her husband. It seems our parents had contacted him last night, and he had rushed back from a business trip. While we were taking care of my niece and her siblings at my sister's house, waiting for their return, my sister and her visibly angry husband came back in the evening. Upon seeing her father, my niece joyfully hugged him.
"Daddy. Welcome home."
"Susan, I'm home. I'm sorry for making you feel lonely. I'm sorry." He hugged my niece tightly, as if making up for the lost time. After putting the children to bed, my husband and I, along with our parents and my sister and her husband, sat down for a serious discussion. When her husband demanded that she tell everything, my sister, still pale, looked down and made excuses, saying, "I wanted a change of pace because of parenting stress."
Even though it seems like you're always hunting for brand name bags. It's the talk of the neighborhood, you know?
What? There was no way my sister was mentally exhausted from childcare. Convinced that she was lying, I shared information I had heard from my colleagues. I recounted not only this incident but also episodes of my sister doing as she pleased while her husband was away, as a form of retaliation for her past actions. Hearing this, her husband became furious. "You've been doing such things while I was gone." To prove the truth of my accusations, a quick search of the house revealed a stash of brand-name goods hidden in the back of my sister's closet. So, what Maple said is true. Faced with the evidence of the brand-name goods, my sister nodded in resignation. According to her confession, she had lied to her husband about the children attending expensive lessons to receive a large sum of money. Moreover, she often neglected the children's care, not only when she was out but also when she was at home. I'm so disappointed in you. You always said you were managing the housework and childcare properly. Let's get a divorce. Having had enough of her, her husband declared his intention to divorce her. Having no excuses left for her misdeeds, my sister quietly accepted the divorce. She couldn't let go of her pride in their mansion, pleading with her husband, "Please leave the house to me." Her husband, who had no interest in the house, agreed to transfer it to her in exchange for a reduction in her share of the other assets. However, the story of what happened spread among the neighbors and her circle of friends, tarnishing her reputation as a woman who mistreated her children and was abandoned by her husband. No one was willing to help my sister. She faced scorn when she went shopping, was rejected when she tried to find part-time work in the neighborhood, and became completely isolated. Eventually, unable to step outside her home and mentally deteriorating, my sister sought help from our parents. However, they had disowned her at the time of her divorce and refused to have any involvement with her. Abandoned by everyone, my sister now lives miserably in the once prized mansion that has turned into a house of clutter. On the other hand, her husband had been seeking to change his work style for the sake of the family. He had applied for a transfer to a department without business trips, hoping to spend more time with his family, and it seemed likely his request would be granted soon. Deciding he couldn't leave the children with their mostly absent mother, he took custody. A decision our parents and I fully supported. The children, especially fond of their father, were thrilled to live with him, saying, "We get to live with Daddy." Without any allies, my sister was left despondent. After the divorce, my brother-in-law and the children moved close to our home. To fill the void of the past lack of interaction, my husband and I sometimes play with the children. Since the incident, the niece has become attached to us, and we occasionally look after her and her sibling when my brother-in-law works late. The baby is growing up healthy and is at a very cute age. Watching the children grow up, we spend our days feeling happy and fulfilled. This cheating wife! How dare you lie about this child being my grandchild? This is not my grandchild at all. Originally, the daughter, who did not resemble my husband, became even more unlike him as she turned 3. The mother-in-law found this strange and seems to have secretly conducted a DNA test between husband and my daughter. She showed me the results with a triumphant look on her face. Now I can formally kick you out. Not only did you fail to produce a male heir, but you also tried to pass off a child from another man as our grandchild. You good for nothing. Get out. While listening to my mother-in-law's passionate speech, I was confused, tilting my head. Let's calm down, Mom. After all, this child isn't my daughter, you know. I showed her the evidence that proved it. Then, she trembled. I thought she would admit her fault at this point, but she twisted the story to her convenience. My dream has always been to become a mother surrounded by many children. When I was about elementary school age, there were other kids who wanted to be mothers, but as we went on to middle and high school, those dreams turned to careers or extended hobbies. Yet, my dream remained to have a family surrounded by lots of children. You like kids so much, why not become a kindergarten teacher, a college friend once suggested. Nowadays, it seems like women are the only ones drawing the short straw by getting married, having children, and entering into domestic life. Going through college, job hunting to get a good job, and building a career, but it all seems wasted if you get married and pregnant. While accepting the opinions of those around me, my desire to have and raise children was stronger than my desire for a career. By my junior year of college, I was desperately job hunting and graduated with a job offer from a decent company. Once employed, I realized how naive I had been during my student days, facing the harsh realities of the working world every day. 3 years into my job, a personnel change took me to a different branch where I met my husband. He was like a mentor to me, spending a lot of time working together. From there, our relationship gradually became more personal. The common ground was our love for children. My husband was considered handsome by general standards, attracting the attention of young female employees at the branch. However, no one made a move because they all assumed a guy that handsome must have a girlfriend. That misconception prevented anyone from approaching him. Eventually, it became known that we were dating, and quite a few female employees lamented, "If only I had known he was available, I would have made a move." After a relationship of about 2 years, we began to think about marriage. I'm also in my late 20s, wanting at least 3 kids. Therefore, I thought marriage was now or never, and things moved swiftly from there. My husband and I wanted children and underwent tests for hereditary diseases. In fact, I have a much younger brother who inherited our father's allergies. It's just a predisposition to allergies, so he ended up with different ones from our dad, and had a hard time as a child. I was tested for allergies too, but, despite having the same father, I didn't inherit them. Having seen my brother struggle, I didn't want our children to go through the same. However, the results were unexpected. Neither my husband nor I had hereditary allergies, but it turned out my husband was infertile. Being perfectly healthy and capable of having children myself, I was honestly devastated when I found out I couldn't have children with my husband. It would have been easier to accept if the roles were reversed. My husband felt guilty, saying I should leave him as he couldn't fulfill my dream of having a family. But I'm not of the age to be chasing dreams. Dreams are dreams, reality is reality. I chose a life with my husband over a family with children. He's the only one for me in this world, and I couldn't see a future with anyone else but him. So, we got married, set up a new home, and started our new life together. My father-in-law was kind and was happy to finally have a daughter, as he had always wanted one. However, my mother-in-law was not so welcoming. I was prepared for some conflict with her, but I realized I had underestimated the situation. She would come to our new home when my husband was away and start saying how she wanted to see her grandchildren. From wanting to see her grandchildren, she moved on to berating me for not producing an heir, saying, "What kind of daughter-in-law are you if you can't bear children?" She would even nitpick on my housekeeping, finding fault where there was none, just because I was not pregnant. To top it off, she blamed my inadequacy as a wife on the ridiculous idea of women advancing in society, and even told me to write my resignation. The stress turned into fear of my mother-in-law. My heart rate would soar, and I'd start hyperventilating. I opened up to my husband about everything, but I couldn't properly explain myself because just remembering what she said and did made me tremble. My husband didn't take it as seriously. It's okay to say that we should keep our distance or not come over when my husband is not around. However, when my husband found out that I was being asked to show my grandchild's face, he started saying he didn't want it known that he was infertile because it's annoying to have people come over to him too. I think it would all settle down if he just told them that. Generally, my husband is a very kind and good man. He might still feel a sense of guilt for not being able to give me the children he loves. Raised by such a mother-in-law, he might have been brought up with the belief that only by having a son can one properly carry on the family legacy. I've heard that his father's side of the family comes from a line of wealthy people. Thinking about the heavy responsibility he carries and the pain of not being able to fulfill it, I couldn't bring myself to push back any harder. Reluctantly, I kept my distance from my mother-in-law as much as possible and avoided seeing her when my husband was not around. During this time, I developed a patch of alopecia about the size of a dime, but then my husband's transfer was confirmed. By marrying my husband, I had been moved to a different department. He said I don't need to follow him to the ends of the earth, but staying in that house meant continuing my relationship with my mother-in-law. I couldn't bear that, so I resigned and decided to follow my husband on his transfer. The place we moved to still had a lot of undeveloped land, and the people were generous and easy to get along with. Best of all, we were quite far from my in-laws, so there was no way my mother-in-law would come just to nag at me. That alone reduced my stress, and my alopecia improved. The air and food were delicious, and I felt like I had gained a bit of weight, but I felt very fulfilled living my own life. Once I got used to the new environment, I started a new job. It was only part-time since I didn't have any qualifications, but working in after-school care felt like a calling for me, someone who had longed for children but couldn't have them. In fact, I had acquired a childcare qualification in college. It's not to become a childcare worker, but because I thought it would be useful for parenting. It seems that qualifications are not required to work in after-school care, but the program in my area was very well organized, and the treatment differed depending on whether you had qualifications. Once they found out I had a childcare qualification, they said I was eligible to take a special certification for after-school care, so they suggested I try for it. After discussing it with my husband, who thought it was a good idea and supported my newfound sense of purpose, I went ahead. After attending courses and such, a little over a year had passed. The area where we live has very comprehensive child welfare services. There are various supports available, and we were able to welcome a new baby girl into our family. My husband was overjoyed, calling it a miracle. I also think that if I hadn't been doing this job, I wouldn't have had this encounter. Perhaps God gave us these trials so we could meet our daughter. My husband immediately reported to his parents. Seeing my husband talk with such high spirits and apparent joy, I think I might have seen him like this for the first time. However, at this time, either due to my husband's poor explanation or my mother-in-law's lack of understanding, the situation took a dreadful turn. When our daughter turned 2 years old, my husband was transferred again, and we had to move back to the region where his parents lived. My husband got promoted and returned to the branch he was previously at. My in-laws were eager to see our daughter, and we started visiting them more frequently. With my husband's promotion, he had more subordinates and wasn't away from home as much, so there was always someone at the in-laws' house, and I thought my mother-in-law's bullying wouldn't be an issue. The long-awaited granddaughter was cherished greatly by my mother-in-law. However, her happiness did not last long.
When are we getting a male heir? Don't act all high and mighty just because you've given birth to one grandchild.
I don't remember doing anything to upset my mother-in-law. But it seems I'm still an unwelcome presence to her.
What's with keeping the pregnancy a secret and only announcing the birth? Was there something shameful?
Normally, you'd announce a pregnancy first, right? She berated me as an unreasonable daughter-in-law. This was supposed to have been explained by my husband. I took it that she knew yet chose to say it on purpose. Gradually, my mother-in-law's complaints extended to my daughter.
They say a daughter takes after her father, but my granddaughter doesn't resemble my son at all.
It's natural they don't look alike, but she started saying it on purpose. Not only did she tell me this, but when my daughter tried to approach her with grandma, she would say, "Don't come over here with your dirty hands," pushing her away as if she were something filthy. Even during meals at the in-laws, if my daughter didn't eat neatly and spilled her food, she was scolded for not having good manners and had the back of her hand slapped repeatedly. "I'm sorry, I'll make sure to discipline her properly later, please forgive her." When I defended my daughter, my mother-in-law would hit my head several times, saying that's why she's spoiled. By the way, if my father-in-law or husband were there, she wouldn't dare to behave so horribly towards me or my daughter. My daughter started saying, "Grandma," scary, and grew distant from my mother-in-law. Then, she started calling my daughter a charmless grandchild. My father-in-law, as always, was very fond of her, and my daughter grew very attached to him. Every time we visited the in-laws, my mother-in-law would nag about whether there were signs of pregnancy yet, urging me to quickly produce a male heir. As I didn't get pregnant, she started suggesting potential brides to my husband.
How about this girl? She looks like she could have easy births and many children. This type seems more likely to have boys.
My husband was called to his parents' house alone, and every time he came back, he would say that's what his mother had suggested. At first, it seemed like some kind of joke, and I thought I was just ignoring it. But after being told the same thing over and over, my husband came to me wondering, could there be a misunderstanding? Taking that into consideration, I confess that since we've been back, my mother-in-law has been annoyingly insistent about me having a boy. Moreover, she has been very cold because our daughter doesn't look like her father, and what she calls discipline is more like corporal punishment. I also told him that our daughter is scared of her grandmother. After all, my mother-in-law's attitude hasn't changed since we got married. In fact, I feel like it's gotten worse. Her treatment of my daughter, especially, is so blatant that it's chilling to think what she might have done when I'm not around. My husband seems to have realized just how painful it was to be constantly nagged by his mother to have a son. He apologized for saying we should just keep our distance, admitting he was wrong and asking for my forgiveness, though belatedly. There are pains you can't understand until you experience them. I told him it's okay. And we discussed what we should do next. As a result, my daughter and I decided to avoid going to my in-laws as much as possible and not to meet my mother-in-law face-to-face. Instead, my husband continued to make appearances at his parents' house whenever called by my mother-in-law. While it's an unbearable humiliation, he initially didn't think of divorcing me and mentioned waiting for the right moment to clarify things. But every time, he came back saying there wasn't a good time today. I knew he had no intention of divorcing and remarrying, and I thought it was better for him to handle my mother-in-law than for me to take action. So, I wasn't worried about him visiting his parents every time he was called, but unexpectedly, things turned in my mother-in-law's favor. Until now, the candidates for remarriage she introduced were only shown to him in photos. But this time, she went so far as to introduce a woman directly to him. Unintentionally, the woman fell in love with him at first sight. He is still handsome, and even if he doesn't like someone, he maintains basic politeness. What was just social politeness for him seemed to be taken seriously by her. I don't think he would say something he doesn't mean, but there's a chance my mother-in-law twisted his words to the woman. With her plan working perfectly, my mother-in-law's actions intensified. This happened when my daughter turned 3. Originally, my father-in-law had contacted us wanting to celebrate my daughter's birthday. But since my husband and I were not keen on having it at my in-laws, we asked to wait a bit longer so we could organize it on another day. My husband prepared for the granddaughter's birthday party. "You're off today, right? Come over with her." Impatient, perhaps he planned it as a surprise. Reluctant as we were to face my mother-in-law, it seemed unfair to refuse, so we took my daughter to my in-laws. However, when we arrived at my in-laws, my father-in-law was not there. At the house, for some reason, was my mother-in-law along with the woman she had suggested as a potential wife for my husband. I had a DNA test done on my son and granddaughter. They just didn't resemble each other much. I didn't want to doubt, but seeing the results, I thought it was clear. "You've been cheating, haven't you? Passing off a child from another man as our son's. That's enough evidence to demand a divorce, isn't it?" Then, my mother-in-law started urging my husband, "You were being deceived, and that such a frivolous woman was not suitable to be your wife." The woman she had suggested as a bride was chiming in with my mother-in-law, clapping her hands and chanting for divorce. I was honestly astounded. Taking advantage of my silence, my mother-in-law and the candidate kept saying whatever they wanted. It was nothing but noise to me. It wasn't that I couldn't argue back, I was just too appalled to even bother. Gathering my wits, I took out a piece of paper and showed it to my mother-in-law. "Sorry to burst your bubble, but it makes perfect sense that my daughter doesn't look like my husband. Moreover, she's not even my biological child." What? What I showed to my mother-in-law was a copy of the document proving that we had welcomed our daughter through a special adoption process. It was evidence of the adoption being finalized, and since she wouldn't understand if explained verbally, my husband and I had decided it was quicker to show her the proof, carrying a copy in case a situation like this ever arose. By the way, our daughter doesn't yet know this fact. She might have some suspicions, but we have no intention of hiding it from her. How dare you deceive us? I welcomed her thinking she was my granddaughter, and she turns out to be someone else's child. That's even worse than if you had cheated and had the child. She criticized me for welcoming a child whose biological parents were unknown. Then my husband shouted, "Silence. I explained everything, right? That we welcomed our daughter through adoption. How did it turn into my wife cheating and having the child?"
Are you out of your mind?
He lost his temper at my mother-in-law's cruel words. He quickly regained his composure and confessed something he had never told his mother.
The reason we can't have biological children is my fault. I found out before we got married that I'm infertile. So, my wife is not to blame at all.
He showed the copy of the test results from when he had found out. Then he revealed that he had asked me not to tell this fact to his mother. Realizing that the inability to have biological grandchildren was due to her own son, she was lost for words and hung her head. And it became clear that the only one who hadn't known or understood was my mother-in-law herself, leaving her struggling to process everything. In that moment, my husband declared we were cutting ties with her.
No matter the misunderstanding, harassing psychologically and bullying a small child is not something adults do.
My husband accused her, saying she had gone far beyond what could be forgiven. She was disowned by her beloved son, but her reaction was minimal, and she might not even understand what had happened. However, having no further reason to speak with my mother-in-law, we left her place. That night, we received a call from my father-in-law. He asked what had happened in his absence, so we told him everything, and he immediately came over to our house. He apologized to me and my daughter for his wife's rudeness. My daughter seemed not to fully understand, but said, "If Grandpa says it's okay, then it's okay." I couldn't be as forgiving. All I could manage was to say I understood. The many actions and words from my mother-in-law had been like hell for me. A few days later, my mother-in-law, who was supposed to have been disowned by my husband, suddenly barged into our house, yelling. And for some reason, my husband's potential bride was also with her. Clearly, she hadn't understood my husband's declaration of estrangement, as expected.
You must have made my son turn against me, right? My son is kind, he's just pitying you and protecting you.
The potential bride echoed her, screaming like she was in charge of the ruckus.
We are the saviors who have come to rescue our victim's son from the evil clutches of his wife.
My mother-in-law shouted, "See for yourself," and as she raised her hand towards my daughter who had peeked out from the room. My daughter flinched in shock, and I shielded her with my body. But the expected pain did not come. Looking up, I saw my husband had stepped between me and my mother-in-law, protecting us. From another room came a loud voice. My father-in-law, who had been hiding in another room, couldn't hold back any longer and burst out.
What did your granddaughter ever do to you? Accept reality for once.
He was standing in front of my mother-in-law to protect me and my daughter. My mother-in-law, not expecting my father-in-law to be there, was taken aback, opening and closing her mouth in surprise. In fact, my father-in-law had been suspicious of the actions of my mother-in-law and the potential bride during his absence and had been keeping an eye on them. He had sensed they were up to no good and informed us. So, today's attack was expected. The only unexpected part was that my daughter, who had been told to stay in her room no matter what, was startled by my mother-in-law's voice and revealed herself. When my father-in-law sensed something was amiss, he wanted to see what my mother-in-law and the potential bride would do, so he hid in another room in our house. He hadn't planned on showing himself in front of his wife, but he couldn't stand by when she tried to hit my daughter.
Are you all blind? How could a family as united as ours ever fall apart? Wake up to the reality, why don't you?
And to top it all off, my father-in-law told his wife that he was aware of all her secrets and brought back the woman who was a candidate to be my husband's wife. A few days later, my father-in-law contacted me. It was about the secrets of my mother-in-law that he mentioned when he was leaving. According to him, he had sensed that his wife had been acting strangely for a while and probably had something to hide. But since it didn't seem to cause any particular trouble, he overlooked it. He appreciated the fact that she had kept the house running while he was often away for work. However, he couldn't make sense of the sudden appearance of the prospective bride and, after the incident that occurred during his absence, he had conducted an investigation into his wife's behavior through a detective agency. In the process, a malicious plan had come to light. My mother-in-law had been having an affair for years. My father-in-law, suspecting she was hiding something, had never imagined it would be an affair and was somewhat shocked. However, his shock turned to anger the moment he learned the identity of the sudden bride-to-be. The woman my mother-in-law had brought as a candidate for marriage was the daughter of her lover. My mother-in-law had no intention of divorcing my wealthy father-in-law, but she also did not want to leave her lover. She thought that if her lover's daughter married her son, family relations would start, making her affair easier to continue. It was all a plan orchestrated by my mother-in-law. Incidentally, the several candidates for marriage shown only in photos to my husband were women found on a matching site. It appears she had registered under my husband's name without his consent and pretended to be him. Furthermore, the daughter of my mother-in-law's lover, the marriage candidate, did not know her father was having an affair with my mother-in-law. She had met him thinking it was just a normal matchmaking attempt by her father and had fallen for the handsome man. The plan to have their children marry each other was also proposed by my mother-in-law to her lover. My father-in-law could no longer trust his wife's excuses for justifying her affair, nor could he believe that she didn't want a divorce only because of his wealth, and he decided to divorce. He also mentioned that having such an adult around was not good for my daughter's education. My father-in-law was firm in his decision, and it seemed that no matter how much his wife begged and apologized, he would not forgive her. Ever since I got married, my mother-in-law, who was always aggressive towards me, suddenly became meek and sought my help.
My husband adored you and your daughter, right? If you guys persuade him, I think he will reconsider.
She pleaded, wanting me to somehow stop my father-in-law from divorcing her. But after all the torment she put me and my daughter through, I owed her no favors. I am not that kind-hearted, nor am I that capable.
Don't joke with me. My husband, daughter, and I have all been hurt by what you've done. Shouldn't there be something you want to say before asking for favors?
That was truly how I felt, even if she apologized now. But my mother-in-law resorted to betrayal.
Did I do something wrong? Sure, I feel a bit sorry for having an affair while my husband was around, but wasn't the issue with the adoption due to your lack of explanation? I'm not to blame here.
Hearing this, my husband threw her out without a word. Then he vehemently chased her away. My father-in-law had initially given his wife some time to find another place to live, but after hearing her story, he revoked this grace period, submitted the divorce papers immediately, and demanded alimony from both his wife and her lover. The lover's situation also became a disaster as he was confronted by his wife due to the various rumors and the alimony notice he received, causing a huge scandal. My mother-in-law's lover, who was married into a moderately wealthy family through his wife, faced a huge uproar for bringing shame to them. Afterwards, he was demanded a significant amount in alimony and ended up being divorced. As for the prospective bride my mother-in-law had arranged, she continued to push forward with her plans to marry my husband, unaffected by her parents' predicaments. That led us to obtain a restraining order against her after she approached our daughter at the park. My mother-in-law, ousted from the family home upon the divorce, began working to pay off the alimony. The alimony owed to her husband was covered by the division of their assets. But the amount demanded by her lover's wife was far beyond what she could afford from the divorce settlement. She began living alone for the first time in her life, in an old apartment with thin walls where she could hear everything from the neighbors. At work, she's constantly making mistakes and getting scolded. She's turned into the kind of person she used to mock me, calling her useless and slow. For the first time in her life, over half a century, she started living a life filled with misery. Our family has grown even closer through this. My daughter is now always laughing and showing interest in various things. Right now, I'm just so excited to see how she grows. My former father-in-law also regularly checks in on us and has become a wonderful grandfather, absolutely smitten with his granddaughter.